My grandfather is the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Secret Decree. You vicious woman, you will get your comeuppance. Earl Hawkins gnashed his teeth and said, "Oh? Don't forget, we are still in the same boat. And your baby is still in my hands. If I die, I promise you will die even more ugly." The dense footsteps downstairs came. "Okay, no more playing. We should get down to business." Mihajevich looked at the hotel owner, who was in a very difficult situation. "Listen, no matter who else is staying in the hotel now, drive them all out. Now that this hotel is booked by us, we will compensate you for your losses. Since the day my grandfather opened the cocoa shop, no one has been driven away. Master, please be kind. Come back tomorrow. It's so late today and it's raining outside. Where do you let the guests stay? I don't care about this. I'm being polite to you now. If you delay important things, you will suffer the consequences." Mihajevich's tone was already unfriendly. Lukaski patted Mihajevich and said, "Let me do it." Lukaski walked to the boss's ear and whispered a few words. After listening, the boss opened his eyes and called the manager. "Except for the two guests dining on the third floor, ask everyone to leave." "But, boss, what about the deposit? Return it to them now. If the money is gone, we can still make money in the future." The manager also heard the boss's hidden meaning. "I'll go now." The guests were driven out into the rain and were indignant. Under the protection of hundreds of gendarmes, dozens of high-standard carriages stopped in front of the Carney Hotel. Seeing the big man getting off the carriage, the guests, who were still furious and shouting for justice, immediately scattered. The leader knocked gently on the door and said in stiff Russian, "Can we have the honor of having dinner with you?" The members of the 17-member council outside the door had already arrived, and these people had different moods. Some people thought this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have the opportunity to please the envoy and give the Tsar a good impression. Some people think that the great moment is coming, and they will have the honor to witness history or even become the creator of history. Some people think that this is the helplessness of a small country. A country cannot even control its own destiny and can only act according to the face of a big country. I can drive away the Grand Duke, but I can't refuse the order of the Tsar. Some people are annoyed. Why didn't they line up in advance? Is it too late now? Some people are terrified. If Serbia is incorporated into Russia, won't Serbia become a battlefield? "It's my honor, please come in." The elegant and calm voice gives people a feeling of spring breeze. Surprisingly, the other party uses very fluent Serbian. This touched the pro-Russian faction in the 17-member parliament. The envoy actually knew Serbian. The Tsar still cared about us. As soon as they entered the door, they saw a Russian beauty dressed boldly, which further confirmed their guess. The envoy in front of them must be the mistress of that adult. The captain of the gendarmerie winked and asked all the waiters to go out. He also withdrew from the door, closed the door outside and personally guarded the door. Count Hawkins lowered his head and said nothing, enjoying his last dinner. He cursed in his heart, "This silly woman." The 17-member council here are all shrewd people. Let's see how she answers. If she is accidentally exposed, she will be dead. "I'd better be a glutton. You must be the special envoy. You are such a beauty." Mihajevich spoke first. "The moon hides because of your beauty." Lukaski was not to be outdone. Count Hawkins almost choked to death. How could these people assume that she was some kind of shitty special envoy? "I clearly didn't say anything. How did this 17-member council get here?" Yelidoniya has already become the special envoy in their minds before she even opened her mouth. Yelidoniya smiled and took a sip, looking at Count Hawkins. At this time, an acquaintance of Earl Hawkins asked Hawkins, "Is the lady you are accompanying the special envoy?" "Yes, that's right. She just came from St. Petersburg and has a special mission," Earl Hawkins answered immediately. After receiving a positive answer, everyone became more unscrupulous. "Special envoy, this pearl necklace of mine is made of the finest North Sea pearls." "Special envoy, I don't know if it's suitable for you to live here. I have a house in the west of the city that can be given to the special envoy to live in for a while. The latest novels are published on the 69th book bar." "Special envoy, it is inevitable that there will be some expenses when you first come to Serbia. This little thing is not a respect." Earl Hawkins was very depressed. "Isn't this a blatant bribe? I have been in Serbia for so many years, and one by one, they ask me for money. Why has no one ever given me a decent gift? You deserve to be cheated. On the other hand, Yeladonia accepted all the gifts without a murmur. Suddenly, her face became serious. Here is a secret decree from His Majesty Nicholas I. I would like to invite you to listen to it. The whole audience immediately fell silent, and the members of the 17-member council sat up straight, waiting for this moment to change their fate. I, the glorious Trinity, the great Lord blessed by God, the despot of all Great and Little Rus, the Emperor and Dictator of Moscow, Kiev, Vladimir, and Novgorod, the Tsar of Kazan, the Tsar of Astrakhan, the Tsar of Poland, the Tsar of Siberia, and words omitted here, in short, the ruler of all northern countries, many other countries, the hereditary successor, monarch and lord of the southeast, northwest and northeast. Yeladonia took a breath and proclaimed that the 17-member parliament of the Principality of Serbia is not afraid of powerful enemies, is brave and tenacious, and stands on its own among the nations of the world. It is truly a model for our Slavic nation. However, there are still our Slavic compatriots in the Austrian Empire who have not yet been independently ruled by it. Every time I think of this, I can't sleep at night and lose my appetite. I have decided to follow the will of heaven and the will of the people. I will send troops to the Austrian Empire and establish a great Slavic empire to save the people from danger and save the people from suffering. I hope you will join me in building the great Slavic empire. After the war, I will reward you according to your merits. This is my decree, thanks to the book friend 20210806232711729 for the reward. Chapter 77, Three Families Divide. After the secret decree was read, a flash of lightning broke through the silent night sky, and heavy rain poured down. The Tsar was going to send troops to Austria, and this secret decree also exploded in the hearts of the 17 members of the parliament like thunderbolt. The only European power that could compete with Russia for the Balkans was the Austrian Empire. In other words, as long as Austria was defeated, the restoration of Constantinople and the recasting of the glory of the Third Roman Empire were just around the corner. A while ago, I heard that a group of robbers went to Vojvodina to rob, but they were besieged by several Austrian regiments and torn open from the middle. It can be seen how poor the quality of the Austrian army is. At least these robber gangs in Serbia did not dare to confront the army head-on. There is just a small problem. Isn't Austria an ally of Russia? Special Envoy, is this true? Aren't the Austrians our allies? And once the war starts, Serbia will be at the gunpoint of the Austrians. What should we do? Milošević really wanted to be a king, but he didn't want to be used as cannon fodder in the Russian-Austrian hegemony. There are many people who share the same idea as Milošević. Everyone wants the benefits, but if Serbia joins the Russian side when Russia and Austria go to war, it will be tantamount to seeking death. Although Serbia has 80,000 troops, its weapons are backward and corruption is serious. Many soldiers can only receive very little military pay, and some even cannot receive military pay at all. Not receiving military pay is secondary. Some troops do not even have enough food to eat. In order not to starve to death, many officers privately organize troops to cross the border for smuggling and robbery. Austria and the Ottoman Empire are their main targets. Lukaski, as the leader of the pro-Russian faction, even changed his name later. His original name was Lukašić, and he once participated in the independence war led by Karađorđe. After the uprising failed, he went to Russia to study law. When he returned from his studies, he found that Karađorđe had been killed by Miloš. He pretended to support Miloš and became Miloš's confidant. Climbing all the way, he mastered the core power of the Albranović dynasty. Even if Miloš found out, it would be useless because Russia was behind him. He hoped to bring Karađorđe's descendants back to Serbia to inherit the legal system. However, once the war between Russia and Austria begins, Serbia will not be able to remain unscathed. No matter which side it joins, Serbia will be retaliated and crushed by the other side. Only by withdrawing from the fight can Serbia be saved. Yes, and Serbia is small and weak. I'm afraid it can't help much. If it loses, it will affect the morale of its Tsar's army. Can we join the war later? Lukaski originally wanted to say can we not join the war, but for the safety of his family, he changed his mind. The other members also talked about their own difficulties. In the final analysis, they didn't want to go to war with Austria and didn't want to be its vanguard. Although Serbia is poor and backward, as a high-level official, they can still wield power. As for the great cause of the Slavic nation, let the old Tsar himself complete it. They agreed to join Russia with both hands. Anyway, they can continue to be the local leader. They don't have the courage to fight Austria. There are also many Serbs living in Vojvodina, and even Serbs serving in the Nordsai fortress. According to the intelligence sent back by these Serbs serving in the Austrian army, the artillery in the Nordsai fortress is more than the artillery of the entire Serbian army. Earl Hawkins drank his wine and smiled bitterly. The previous Serbian Grand Duke Milos was forced to step down because he did not cooperate with the great policy of the Tsar. But is there really only one person who resists that Tsar's policy? He doesn't know who is behind Yeladonia, nor does he know why they want to provoke a war between Serbia and Austria. He only knows that the other party has evidence of his collusion with the French, and that evidence will appear on the desk of the adult in the 3rd Special Department of the Chief in a month. If he wants to survive, he must cooperate with Yeladonia's crazy plan. He has never thought about who the other party is, and he doesn't want to know. Maybe it's French, or Prussian, or British. In short, there are only a few big countries in Europe. It is impossible for businessmen to want to provoke war and profit from it. Solomon Rothschild is entertaining a friend from afar. On the plate is a steak with blood, and in the wine glass on the table is a bloody red wine. It's really interesting, you don't know. When I said I wanted 200,000 guns, the official's expression was so ridiculous. Russia is still good. You can actually buy the inventory of their arsenal directly. Aren't I also helping them to get rid of the inventory? They should be grateful to me. When I left, they were very grateful and wrote me a letter of recommendation, recommending me to be an official. You are really amazing. I still need to buy new ones here. I can only sell food and construction materials to make some pocket money. How can our King Solomon say that? He is too modest. This business is also thanks to His Majesty the King. Otherwise, we businessmen in the bitter cold land really don't know how to make money. When the cannon sounds, there will be a lot of gold. Ho ha ho ho. Solomon raised his glass high. Cheers to a common cause, to freedom. The cups and plates were in a mess. Yeladonia was neither anxious nor angry. As far as I know, the Hungarians have begun to open the floodgates. I don't know whether Belgrade will be flooded, but Serbia's grain harvest will definitely be poor this year, and the Central Plains are very likely to have no harvest. In winter, without the Austrians sending troops, the hungry refugees and the soldiers who don't get paid will tear you apart. We can buy food with the money, we can. Mihajevic suddenly thought of something and was speechless. In previous years, you could, of course, but once the war starts, who will sell food to you, and who will lend you money? Yeladonia walked to the window and opened a window. The strong wind and heavy rain rushed into the room, and the thunder and lightning were like golden snakes dancing wildly. It seems that this rain will not be too small. The people in the room began to reconsider this issue. If they could not transfer the contradictions, they would undoubtedly be nailed to the pillar of shame by the contradictions. There were not many options. Either invite the pro-Russian Alexander Karageorge to govern, or invite the Abramovich family back. But both are impossible. The former came to power with the support of the Russians and will definitely support Russia. After the war, no matter who wins or loses, the 17-man parliament will be liquidated. The latter was forced out by the 17-man parliament. If he comes back to power, he will definitely fight back. He may even join the Austrian side and offer the heads of the 17-man parliament to the Austrian emperor as a stepping stone for advancement. There is another way to go, that is to fight the Russians. If you win, the serfs will rise up and sing, and if you lose, the worst thing is to change countries and continue to be serfs. The latest novels are first published on the 6th 9-book bar. Please rest assured, we Russians will definitely be the winners. Because it is not only us Russians that are sending troops to Austria this time, France and Prussia will also attack Austria at the same time. What you have to do is to take over Nordsavia and occupy Vojvodina to create a fait accompli. Will France and Prussia also send troops together? Everyone widened their eyes. Although it was ridiculous, they couldn't help but believe it. Wasn't the powerful Poland divided in this way? They had no confidence in fighting against the entire Austrian Empire, but it was no problem to take over the province of Vojvodina. That's right, we Russians will send troops to Transylvania, France will send troops to Italy, and Prussia will send troops to Bohemia. The three countries will send troops at the same time to divide Austria together. As long as you can take over Vojvodina to create a fait accompli before the three countries sign a peace agreement, Austria will have to recognize your interests. Vojvodina has only one army, While Serbia has 12 armies, not fully staffed, with a large number of vacancies, which is a great advantage. Moreover, Vojvodina is an agricultural production area and a large plain, with almost no danger to defend. As long as the Nordsai fortress is captured, there will be no more obstacles ahead. Vojvodina province has a large number of Serbs, more than 500,000, who are easy to rule, and the land is fertile and the products are rich, which can solve the food crisis Serbia is facing now. The members of the 17-member council could not help but smile, and they loved to fight this kind of battle that they were sure to win. Yeladonia added fuel to the fire. Your Majesty knows everything you have done over the years. Whether it is collusion with Britain, France, or the Ottomans, His Majesty will not hold you accountable. His Majesty also knows that you all have power in the army. After this war, His Majesty will reward you according to your merits. The one with the greatest merit will be made the King of Serbia. If anyone wants to preserve his strength and hesitate in this war, His Majesty will not let him go. Earl Hawkins and I will supervise you. The members of the 17-member council could not help but be stunned. Is this a blatant solicitation of bribes or a reminder for everyone not to mess around? Ahem, I wrote very quickly today. But there may be some places that may not be detailed enough. Feel free to point out any errors. Chapter 78 Waiting. In order to seize the initiative while launching an attack from Russia, the Serbian Parliament of 17 coordinated with the Russian army's actions. The National Army was ordered to gather at the Austrian border. In order not to stimulate the Austrians, the gathering place was set up in the small town of Ireg, 60 kilometers away from the border. 80,000 Serbian soldiers will be deployed within a month, including 150 old-fashioned cannons. This is all the troops of Serbia. In addition, they also recruited 5,000 civilians to repair the roads. They also mobilized a large amount of supplies, and found that the soaring prices of weapons and other military supplies in the market further confirmed what the special envoy said. So they worked harder to study how to conquer Nordsavie, and at the same time did not forget to intensify their efforts to please the special envoy Yeladonia. Yeladonia picked out the worst pearl from a box of pearls and threw it into a grinder to pound it into powder. Then add clean water to make a paste and gently apply it on the face. You bitch, you're still so conceited. You've received so many things and you're still not running. When they'll realize it in a few days, you'll be dead. I don't want to be buried with you. Count Hawkins looked at the piles of gifts around him, but he couldn't be happy. Isn't it nice here? I eat well, I dress well, and my skin has improved. Yeladonia pretended to be calm, but she was actually panicking inside. It's just that she really couldn't bear to leave so many treasures, and Franz promised her that he would send someone to take her and her treasures away and send them to Italy. Although most of the soldiers were transferred to the front line, there were still hundreds of policemen and thousands of gendarmes in Belgrade, plus the remaining soldiers in the barracks outside the city, a total of 5,000 people. The attacking party must have at least 5 times the number of troops as the defending party to quickly capture the city. As for a fortress city with a bastion like Belgrade, it requires 8 times the number of troops. Even with the old traitor Miloš leading the way, all the checkpoints in Serbia can be bypassed. Austria only had an incomplete army in Nordsavie. At this time, an army of the Austrian Empire should have 20,000 people, and the garrison in Nordsavie had less than 10,000 people. Together with an Italian regiment brought by Karimi, the total force was only 12,000 people. What she was counting on was the secret weapons and reinforcements that Franz mentioned. The thing that made her happiest these days was that the flood destroyed part of the city wall of Belgrade. And due to the shortage of manpower and funds, no one repaired a damaged city wall. In a fortress only 20 kilometers away from Belgrade, 800 elite veterans recruited by Blackwater from all over Austria were being reviewed by their employer. Miloš looked at the group of Austrian veterans in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. Just now, the garrison troops of the fortress were ordered to go out by his men, and they were ambushed by these people on the way and were beaten without any ability to fight back. 180 people were killed, and the rest were surrendered. Only 3 people from Blackwater were killed. Miloš's purpose was simple, to use these foreign mercenaries to open a passage to Belgrade. Let the Austrians attack the city, and after the Austrians capture the city, liquidate all political enemies and rebuild the rule of the Obrenović dynasty. Then organize a punitive army with this unit as the core to eliminate those armed forces that do not obey their orders and are entrenched in various places. Miloš felt that the young man who was negotiating business with him was really terrible. An absurd war initiated by the Parliament of 17 could not only help him rebuild his rule, but also make the Russians speechless. It was simply killing two birds with one stone, and it cost him so much money. It was much better than that prime minister who was so stubborn. He actually rejected me several times. It was abominable. What kind of European prime minister is this? He is not as good as a washerwoman. Miloš looked at his son Mihoja, who was still eating lollipops at his age, and he couldn't help but get angry, so he ran away. Without his belt, Miloš could only chase Mihoja while holding up his pants. Lukács leaned on a cane and touched his chin. Serbia's future is difficult. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Thanks to the book Franz Bookworm He, Bat Clown, and Zyadang 246 for their rewards. Chapter 79. There may be no update today. I don't know when I will be able to get home. Chapter 80. There is meat to eat recently. At 5:15, a gunshot broke the silence. The soldiers got up from their beds in a panic. They all knew that this was the new wake-up call. If they couldn't get dressed before the garrison commander arrived, then he wouldn't be able to get dressed for the whole day. The new garrison commander was a pervert. Previously, a captain was ordered to go naked and train with his soldiers because he was sleeping naked when the garrison commander walked in front of him. The captain protested by resigning, but he still had to participate in the training naked with two soldiers pointing guns at his head. Let the soldiers get up in the dark, and either do harsh training for several months, or let them lie on the wall like groundhogs. Don't we have to lose the battle if we can't run to the designated post within 5 minutes? Don't we have to shoot bullets because we can't speak German? Can't they send a few more sentries out to notify us earlier? Lieutenant Manchel complained. Lieutenant Taro didn't quite agree. Gather at 5:20, so why don't we get up at 5? It's better to train harder than to be shot on the battlefield. Once the battle starts, the sooner you get into the combat position, the more effectively you can stop the enemy. How can you command the soldiers if they can't even understand what you're saying? Yesterday, an Italian soldier had his throat slit by a Croatian sentry because he forgot to command and couldn't speak German. You can speak 4 languages, so of course it's easy for you to speak. I joined the army at the age of 16 and only spoke Hungarian, but I've survived all these years. What does being able to fight have to do with whether you can speak German? After the Napoleonic Wars, there weren't any decent battles in Austria. The biggest battles were in Italy to quell the rebellion, but those people were just a few people using an old-fashioned musket. You've never fought in a war, haven't you? What you say sounds like the truth. I haven't participated in a battle directly, but I have cleaned up the battlefield. No one picked up the weapons used by the rebels, and only people like me who are so poor and can only clean up the battlefield would take them. Okay. Obeying orders is the duty of a soldier. Since the commander has asked us to do so, we officers should just do it. This 20 words you must know on the battlefield is nothing new. I had it when I first joined the army. Later, there was no war, and Hungary was making a fuss about equality and asking soldiers to learn Hungarian. In order not to increase the burden on the soldiers, it was simply cancelled. The old captain was a German, but the Napoleonic Wars ended just after he joined the army. Since the boss had spoken, the two of them naturally had nothing to say. The direct superior was much more terrifying than the garrison commander who didn't even talk. The two changed the topic and continued to chatter. The old captain held his fort in peacetime without war. It was difficult for a soldier with no background to become an officer. The old captain, who had served for nearly 30 years, was as excited as a child when he saw the behavior of these new garrison commanders. He concluded that there would definitely be a war, and a capable archduke was in command. There was also the elite dragoon regiment, as well as various supplies that had been shipped recently. This is definitely not what should happen in this remote little fortress. And it is even more outrageous judging from the recent meals. Ordinary soldiers can actually eat meat, which was a fantasy in the past. That is why ordinary soldiers rarely complain no matter how hard they try. However, judging from the position of the cannons and the deployment of troops, the enemy this time does not seem to be the Ottomans. But how could such a small country like Serbia attack the powerful Austrian Empire? The old captain couldn't figure it out. He noticed that some Serbian soldiers had behaved strangely recently, and what puzzled him even more was that the garrison commander seemed to have seen all of this but did not stop it. He didn't want to care about his quarreling subordinates anymore, and he was going to take a break. Save some energy and eat meat tonight. Maybe the war he was looking forward to will start tonight. Chapter 81. Meritorious service. 1. After a day of training, the officers and soldiers lined up to eat in the canteen. Due to the current garrison commander's requirements, officers must eat with their soldiers and are not allowed to cook separately. So it was rare for the soldiers to see meat and other carefully processed ingredients in their dinner. The so-called canteen was just a big shack with a few simple tables. Each soldier could get 2 pieces of black bread and a bowl of sticky food made of various vegetables and beans, as well as a bowl of broth with floating meat. The meat in it went to the officer's plate, and of course a glass of inferior strong liquor, vodka, or a bit bitter dark beer. The soldiers were able to drink beer that did not turn sour thanks to the invention of pasteurization. But this has become the church's patent, the glory of God, God's, which also made the soldiers more pious when praying before meals. Just as the soldiers were about to enjoy the rare food, a gunshot rang out, and the quartermaster rolled on the ground, holding his thigh. Karimi never expected that the Austrian army had become so corrupt. He had already replaced 3 quartermasters. And this 4th quartermaster still replaced the wheat that the soldiers ate with rye for livestock. He also fished out dead pigs that washed up from the river and fed them to the soldiers. In fact, Karimi had wronged the new quartermaster. Born in the royal family, he only knew that rye could be fed to horses. But in fact, eating rye was nothing for ordinary people. They had eaten bread with bran mixed with sawdust and dirt. As for the matter of fishing dead pigs from the river, there was no way to wash it away. It was considered that he deserved it. Several heralds rode on horses to notify each barracks. General Karimi has an order. There was a commotion in the crowd, and the officer roared, "Be quiet, be quiet. I warn you, if anyone whispers again, he will be rewarded to stand guard with the sentry tonight." The soldiers put down the food in their hands and stood in unison waiting for orders. "Pour out all the broth and bury it on the spot." Huh? The officers and soldiers couldn't believe their ears. "Repeat it, pour out all the broth and bury it on the spot." "This is an order." The herald repeated it again. The next moment, a large number of soldiers didn't care about the burn and hurriedly poured the broth into their mouths. I don't know who was the first to pour the broth into his mouth without caring about the burn. Then the other soldiers followed suit and began to guzzle the broth. The herald could only leave helplessly. Soon, each military camp received a batch of supplies. Each soldier received 6 boxes of canned food, which was a high-end product in this era. Many soldiers treasured the canned food after receiving it and prepared to bring it to their families when they returned home. The soldiers were very grateful to the new garrison commander. They all thought that the new commander was a good person, except that he looked a little strange, standard Habsburg big chin. Karimi became more and more anxious because the date he and Franz agreed was getting closer and closer. Soon, 30,000 to 40,000 Serbian soldiers will attack the Nordsavi fortress, and he will need to send 2,000 elite soldiers to attack Belgrade. He has studied the route map provided by Milos, and he can indeed approach Belgrade unnoticed by following the route above. However, soldiers can pass through the rugged mountain roads, but cannons cannot. To attack a strong city like Belgrade, without artillery, it is only possible if the enemy is a god. The secret weapon Franz mentioned is the kind of artillery that a single soldier can use. Karimi was restless. All he could do now was to arrange defenses, try his best to solve the army's worries, and prevent possible betrayals. Then he would do his best to delay the Serbian army and buy more time for the surprise attack troops. The old captain Kant became happier and happier as he looked at it, because this thing had confirmed his guess. Because this thing is not given out casually, it is an absolute military supply. Even in wartime, you can't eat this thing unless you are on a forced march. Young men, your chance to make meritorious deeds has come. Is there anyone who wants to go on an adventure with Uncle Hans? The old captain was a very nice person. The name Hans was as common in northern Germany as the name dog leftovers in a mysterious eastern country. However, the stereotype of the natives of the Austrian Empire about Germans was that Frederick was a treacherous and treacherous devil. In addition, the old captain often talked about making meritorious deeds, so everyone called him Hans, making meritorious, Frederick. A group of soldiers signed up enthusiastically, because the old captain had a good background and was very knowledgeable, and he had been in the Austrian imperial army for many years and could speak the languages of almost all ethnic groups. The soldiers followed the old captain to patrol with the mentality of listening to stories and taking a walk to digest food. At least with the old captain, they would not be accidentally killed as chickens by the Croatian scouts wandering in the woods. The soldiers at the front sentry watched as the old captain led a group of young men out of the barracks that looked like shacks. "It's getting dark, what are you going to do, Captain Hans?" the sentry asked with a smile. "It's a dark and windy night, go on patrol to prevent the enemy's sneak attack." The old captain pointed to the 9 young soldiers behind him. "They're all good guys, but they still need experience. You must want to make a contribution again. Don't lead the young people astray. It's good to have dreams, but it's not good to daydream like you all day long," the sentry captain shouted loudly, deliberately letting the old captain's soldiers hear clearly. "How can you slander someone's innocence like this? What? I tell you that I have been guarding the gate here for 10 years. Since the day I was a new recruit, I have seen him go out on patrol every day, and heard him say that he should be on guard against the enemy's sneak attack and make a great contribution. But what about the enemy? I haven't seen any to this day. And this guy is still the same as me, a salted fish." The sentry captain spread his hands, and the sentries around him laughed. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. The old captain has long been used to it and does not argue. What's wrong with wanting to make merit? A soldier who doesn't want to be a general is not a good soldier. The old captain thought of his old superior Colonel Karen. Although he was a Croatian, he spent his whole life fighting bandits in Austria. In the end, he offended his superiors and was thrown into prison because of fighting bandits. He didn't know how he was doing now. He only remembered that when the colonel was arrested, he shouted, "I swear to be loyal to the royal family and defend the country. I have a clear conscience." The old captain led his men away from the sentry post and walked in the woods beside the road, lowering their footsteps. The young soldiers followed suit. Some people really wanted to try their luck and make merit, but more people just thought it was fun. The flood had just receded, and walking in the muddy woods in the middle of the night was not a fun thing. Several soldiers were ready to retreat, but they couldn't speak first because the other party was a captain. Suddenly, the old captain said, "Be quiet, the land here has been trampled." The old captain lowered his body and carefully passed through the hedge in front. There was a faint light in the ruins destroyed by the flood. Someone walked here with a torch, and the old captain lay in the mud. The soldiers behind him also covered their mouths and lurked quietly in the mud of the woods. The man with the torch was also carrying a long gun. Judging from the style of his clothes and gun, he was obviously not a hunter nearby. The hunters nearby would not go to the sides of the road to hunt. The man walked under a big tree, looked around, whistled, and started to release water. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82, Meritorious Service, 2. Just when the man was most relaxed, his mouth was covered and a sharp knife was placed on his neck. "If you don't want to die, do what I say." "Whatever I say," you answer. "If you understand, just nod your head," the old captain said in Serbian. The subdued Serbian nodded in panic. The accompanying young soldier felt very strange. Why bother talking? Just call someone directly. Anyway, they are just a group of smugglers. "Are you a Serbian soldier?" the old captain continued to ask. The other party nodded. Everyone began to realize that something was wrong. Why did Serbian soldiers appear in the territory of the Austrian Empire? Did they lose their way? Don't they know that this will cause international problems? But this place is dozens of kilometers away from the border. It's too far to get lost. Unlike the naive soldiers, the old captain always thought that there would be a war. "How many of you came and where are you now?" The old captain released his hand covering the Serbian soldier's mouth. "I don't know. There are 30 people in our team. They are resting over there." "What are you doing here?" "The commander asked us to set fire to the nearby village. Then we will ambush the Austrian soldiers who are going to put out the fire on the road." This is the plan thought up by Mihaljevik's younger brother, Valjevic. Valjevic is the most capable general in Serbia and also controls the most elite troops. After receiving the letter from his brother who is a member of parliament, Valjevic calmly analyzed the enemy in our situation. He concluded that although the Serbian army has an advantage in numbers, the quality of the soldiers and firepower are too poor. A strong attack will inevitably cause a large number of casualties. At that time, even with the support of Russia, it will not be able to convince the public. If you want to take Nord Sahi and preserve your strength, the best way is to disperse the enemy's forces and defeat them one by one. Although most of the residents nearby are Serbs, for the great ideals of Serbia, let their villages burn for the Holy War. Valjevic is a fanatical great Slavist. He was infected by the spirit of the Tsar's three families to divide Austria. He was in a state of excitement for several consecutive days and couldn't sleep. He also wanted to establish an unprecedented achievement on the battlefield, but he liked to use open tactics, just like this battle. In the village burning in the raging fire, the Austrians would be defeated one by one if they went to rescue. If they did not rescue, Austria would lose the support of the people in Vojvodina province. At that time, as long as they claimed that the fire was set by the Austrians, the people would naturally turn to the Serbian side. In any case, before his army arrived, the Austrians had already lost half the battle. At that time, as long as they completely defeated the Austrians in the front, the local tyrants and the people in Vojvodina province would have to accept this reality. It was just that a butterfly flapped its wings a few times, which made him see an unexpected picture. And finally he realized that he had been struggling in a spider web. The old captain blocked his mouth with a torn sock, and then knocked him out with a rifle butt. Boys, the opportunity to make merry has come. Do you want to take risks with old Hans? Faced with the invitation of the old captain, everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. There are only 10 of us. And there are 30 on the other side. Oh, no. There are 9, and one more person is going to report. Children, fix your bayonets, we have to surround them. We must not let any of them get away and let them spread the news. Yes, sir. Although these young soldiers thought the plan was crazy, they were still infected by the old captain's enthusiasm. You have to know that the rifles of this era need at least 20 seconds to reload after firing once before firing the second time. 9 against 30, it is an impossible task no matter how you look at it. The theory of whoever shoots first has the advantage does not apply here at all. In this case, on average, each person has to deal with at least 3 people. The soldiers were extremely nervous, but they still divided into 3 groups according to the plan and surrounded the enemy from 3 different directions. A man who looked like an officer in the ruins was arguing with a man dressed as a villager. Judging from the man dressed as a villager, he should be the militia leader cooperating with the Serbian army. The militia leader tried to persuade the officer not to burn down his village. The officer disagreed, and the two got into an argument. In fact, the officers were also in a difficult situation. On the one hand, there were military orders from their superiors, and on the other hand, there were the interests of their compatriots. They had clearly come to save the oppressed Slavic brothers, but now they had to burn down their villages and destroy their property with their own hands. This was really unreasonable. At this moment, a gunshot rang out, and a bullet hit the officer's shoulder. The officer fell to the ground, and the soldiers around him were about to use their guns to fight back. They found that the enemy appeared in 3 different directions at the same time. The latest novel is published on the 69th book bar. Raise your hands, don't move, you are all arrested. Be honest, I will kill anyone who moves. Several young Austrian soldiers shouted loudly to give themselves courage. They felt that their hearts were about to jump out. Because as long as the enemy rushed up regardless of everything, they would definitely die. A Serbian soldier just wanted to touch the gun, and was stabbed in the stomach by an Austrian soldier with a bayonet. The Austrian soldier was obviously inexperienced and fell into hysterical excitement when he killed the enemy for the first time. He grabbed the gun and stabbed the body with a bayonet again and again, until his companion pulled him away. Fortunately, the Serbian officer ordered to give up resistance and avoided a fierce battle. The old captain ordered a simple bandage for the injured Serbian officer and rushed back to the camp with 29 prisoners. In the headquarters, Karimi also received news that the Serbs were about to set fire to the surrounding villages. Karimi mobilized a large number of manpower to counter the enemy's infiltration operations. In the next few days, the scouts of both sides fought many bloody battles in nearby villages and woods. Although Valjevic, as a general, had extremely superb tactics, it was really incomprehensible to the lower-level officers and the people. The Serbian army that came to liberate Vojvodina set fire everywhere and drove its residents out of their homes, while the Austrians, as evil occupiers and heretics, were protecting the people's property with their lives. At the same time, the War of Serbia's invasion of Austria officially began. Valjevic led 39,000 Serbian soldiers and 120 cannons across the border and headed straight for the Nordsai fortress. The Austro-Serbian War officially began. The Belgrade Parliament of 17 was excited when they saw the newspapers brought by spies from Russia and Austria. Because it said that Russia, France, and Prussia declared war on Austria, Prime Minister Metternich announced his resignation, and Austria was in chaos. Thanks to the book Franz Kai Fung Kong Gaiao and Bat Clown for the reward. Chapter 83, Strategy, 1. At this time, small groups of Austrians and Serbs were fighting in villages, roads, and fields near Nordsee. Originally, this kind of guerrilla warfare should have been more advantageous for the Austrians fighting on their own. But in fact, due to the support and help of the local Serbians, the Serbian army had the upper hand. Due to the huge difference in the strength of the two sides, the Austrian army could not use the main force to clear out the guerrillas. The Serbian guerrillas kept burning villages and driving the residents to the Nordsee fortress. Valjevic's tactics were simple, which was to strike at the morale of the Nordsee army while constantly consuming the strength and supplies of the Nordsee army. These small groups deep into Vojvodina made the Austrians' troops stretch to the limit. In a desperate situation, Kerimi decided to send people to destroy bridges and roads to slow down the advance of the Serbian army. The refugees near the Nordsee fortress needed to consume a lot of food every day. Since they did not expect the Serbian army to use this strategy in advance, Franz and Kerimi were caught off guard. According to the prior plan, the battle would be over within a month. The food that Franz had transported in advance to the Nordsee fortress was enough for 1 year. But with the increase in the number of refugees, the food in Nordsee would definitely not last more than a month. The letter for help was sent to the Hungarian parliament as soon as possible, but Kerimi's letter for help was like a stone sinking into the sea without any news. After the war, the Hungarian reply was that it had not been received. However, on the only way for Vojvodina province to enter the Hungarian plain, 4 regiments of troops were deployed to prevent refugees from pouring into Hungary. General, put away your useless sympathy. Now is not the time to act on impulse. The Serbs are coming, and we don't have much time. We can no longer disperse our forces to rescue those civilians. Anyway, there are Serbs on both sides and they shouldn't do anything to them, the adjutant advised. How can there be such a crazy strategy? Are they still soldiers? Involving civilians, what kind of nobles are they? I didn't expect that the total war mentioned in On War, which was highly praised by both Franz and Archduke Karl, would be understood in this way. Kerimi suddenly laughed wildly, his smile was a little ferocious. Great, the potential for destroying the country's war is really strong. Archduke Kerimi, are you okay? The adjutant asked, seeing that Kerimi looked a little scary. No, I'm fine now. Very good. Kerimi's face, which was a little ugly to begin with, showed a fanatical distortion. What would Archduke Karl do, and what would that guy Albrecht do? Go and release Franz's cavalry regiment. Tell them to use battalions and companies as action units to clear out the Serbian troops that have penetrated deep into the hinterland, and only allow them to retreat the enemy but not pursue them in depth. Those who violate the law will be subject to military law, but that is our trump card. If we lose the cavalry regiment, who will escort you, the Archduke, to break through the siege? Obviously, the adjutant was frightened by the overwhelming offensive of the Serbs. In fact, Valjevic was also desperate. Because when he was gathering his troops, he found that the food that was delivered was mixed with sand. This may not be appropriate. To be precise, it should be half sand and half food. Some bags of the food delivered contained food, and some bags contained sand. He never thought that at this critical moment that determines the life and death of the country, there would be people who would do such a thing for their own selfish interests. Fortunately, although Vojvodina province is not rich, it has sufficient food. Just fight and rob all the way. This has been done since ancient times. Seeing the broken bridge and roadblocks, Valjevich smiled. It seems that the Austrians have reached the end of their rope. Think about it, which country in the world can independently support the attack of Russia, Prussia and France? It is said that the defenders of Nordsee attacked from all sides and fought against their own infiltration troops. Those who want to defend everything often cannot defend anything. It seems that the Austrians do not understand this reality very well. After all, they are noble lords. Naive? Ridiculous. Then let me teach you what war is. Send another regiment to infiltrate. In groups of 30, you must drive all the residents around Nordsee to the Nordsee fortress. They will not be able to hold on. When the cannon sounds, someone will naturally hand over the city. Valjevic threw a half-smoked cigar onto the house of the resident next door and set it on fire. The stench of burning corpses came from the house. Move forward, the soldiers set off happily with the loot they had collected, leaving a mess behind. In this era, soldiers' salaries were generally very low, and the only way to generate income was to rob. This expedition to Vojvodina was no exception. In a village near Nordsavy, an old man lay lazily on a chair. The afterglow of the setting sun sprinkled on his face, warm and comfortable. The old man looked at the half-missing bacon on the eaves and the empty gun rack, smiled knowingly, and then became sad again. This little bastard actually stole my hunting rifle and bacon. He should have joined the Serbian army to fight the Austrians. If they win this war, they might become a high-ranking official. This heartless guy didn't even bother to tell us if he had enough trade in the army. Dad, what if he finds a lover outside after becoming an official? Austria is so big, can we win? What if he dies? The old man's daughter-in-law was a little nervous. Don't worry, no matter how big Austria is, can it be bigger than the Ottoman Empire? We Serbs are born warriors, unlike those Croatian cowards. The old man pointed to a house in the village, which was emitting a foul stench. Dad, then if we win the war, do we not have to pay taxes in the future? Although the young woman was wearing a loose coarse linen dress, she was full of energy and had a healthy beauty. Of course. We will all be masters in the future. We don't have to work in the fields. We can just collect taxes from those Croatians. The old man smiled happily. Look, it's our Serbian army, someone shouted at the entrance of the village. People from every household came out and stood on both sides of the road, watching the arrival of the Serbian army. An officer saw the beautiful young woman at a glance and waved his whip. The soldiers understood and surrounded the two people in the yard. The other officers also found their targets, and there was a lot of chaos. The old man put down his pipe, quickly got up from the chair, and said with a smile on his face, Master, we are one. My son and the young men in the village just joined the army a few days ago and are fighting the Austrians with you. His name is Rafanovich. Do you know him? Of course I know him, but you should also know that the army must have enough food to fight. Since your son is also a soldier, he should contribute to the army, the officer said righteously. Of course, the food is in the cellar. I'll go get some for you. The old man still had a smile on his face. No need, we'll get it ourselves. The officer waved his hand, and several soldiers broke open the cellar and went to move the food. Although it was very rough, in the eyes of ordinary people at that time, this was the usual practice of the army. So no one raised any objections, but the harvest was not very satisfactory to the officer. At this time, the young woman asked excitedly, Do you know Rafanovich? Is he doing well? I am his wife. Can you tell me how he is doing? The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. The woman was obviously a little excited and incoherent. The officer, who was still a little entangled, suddenly became clear. Of course, he is an excellent soldier. I plan to promote him to sergeant. He and I are in the same regiment. He often mentioned you to me and said he missed you very much. Really? The young woman was ecstatic. Can you take me with you? The young woman came very close, so close that the officer could see that her bra was not fastened properly. The officer looked very embarrassed. The young woman gritted her teeth and said, There is a cellar under my father's bed in the room. There is a lot of food in it. The old man laughed uglier than crying when he heard it. You have to leave some rations for us, right? The officer smiled and said, Don't worry, leave rations for him. We will take the rest. The officer said to the old man again, Don't worry, we will definitely compensate you after the war is won. I can write you a receipt. The officer wrote a note with a big stroke of his pen and handed it to the old man. Keep it, come to me later. The old man couldn't read at all, but he had to accept it because the form was stronger than the person. The officer turned around and looked at the smart young woman. After all, he is my brother, so I will do you this favor. Chapter 84, Strategy, 2. The army left a village with food and dozens of women. However, not all villages did not resist, such as a Croatian village. The men of each family lay on the stone wall at the entrance of the village, while the women made fire and cooked and loaded bullets for the men's guns. Almost every family living on the border has a gun. This is especially true among the Croatians with military traditions. Some villages even have homemade cannons. Krami village is a Croatian village. The Serbs are coming, and we must not let them enter our village. Long live Austria. Fight to the death. The country will not abandon us. The Croatians' fighting will is much stronger than the Serbian army thought. Since the Serbs fought in small groups, each team of 30 soldiers had no way to deal with such a Croatian village that fought to the death. They could only gather a few teams before they dared to attack the Croatian village. The battle had been going on for 6 hours, from morning to afternoon. There were casualties on both sides, and if we only look at the casualty ratio, the Serbs' losses were greater. However, most of the villagers in Krami village were civilians, and they had a lower tolerance for casualties. Some people were on the verge of collapse. Surrender, they will kill us all. You can see that there are more and more Serbs. We are all dead. Do you think you won't die if you surrender? I went to visit my relatives in Kamen village yesterday. I saw with my own eyes that they killed the resistance and drove the remaining people in the village into a house. Then they set fire to the house. If you want your family to suffer the same fate, go out and surrender, said the village chief. He's a retired lieutenant and everyone in the village respects him very much. Due to historical and religious reasons, the two nations have always been at odds, and now the Serbian tactics have damaged Croatia's interests. Therefore, the will of most Croatians to resist the war is still very firm. Listen, what's the sound? An old hunter lay on the ground and listened to something. Several experienced hunters and veterans also put their ears to the ground. It's cavalry. There are cavalry rushing in this direction, the old hunter shouted. The village chief's face instantly became very ugly, because as long as the cavalry rushed in, they couldn't defend it even if they tried their best. Tell everyone to bring pitchforks. If the cavalry rushes over, you can use guns to shoot them. If that doesn't work, just fight them with pitchforks. Killing one will pay for it, and killing two will be a profit. Although he said this, his hand holding the gun still trembled. Since light cavalry usually use sabers, there is still a certain length advantage in using pitchforks to serve. No, look. That's our Austrian cavalry. The ones who came were the dragoon regiment under Franz's name. These well-equipped dragoons were professional skirmishers when they dismounted, and they were also better than ordinary cavalry on horseback. Born into military aristocrats, they had courage that ordinary people in the Syria did not have. The cavalry officer saw the loose formation of the Serbs who were still fighting the Croats, and immediately realized that the opportunity for war had come. Charge, disperse the enemy, the cavalry officer shouted, and the messenger on the side blew the charge horn. A cavalry battalion, more than 100 cavalrymen charged from the flank. For these Serbian soldiers who had hardly seen a cavalry charge, it caused a huge shock. As luck would have it, they had just finished a round of shooting and were still busy reloading bullets. Many were in a panic, and some even gave up the barrels with the cleaning rods inserted in them and turned around to run away. Only a few people could skillfully bite open the bullet bags and pour gunpowder into them to complete the loading. But at this time, the cavalry had already rushed to them, stabbing with long spears, waving sabers, and blood splattered. The cavalry were just like chopping straw men in training, but they were more excited because it was an actual battle. Wherever the cavalry passed, there was a mess. This Serbian army, which had been gathered with great difficulty and consisted of more than 100 people, was almost all killed after the first round of charge by 100 cavalrymen. Those who tried to escape were even less likely to succeed. They were caught up by the cavalry and hacked to death. Some people lay on the ground to avoid the cavalry, which was even more ridiculous. The well-trained horses would trample over them to prepare for the second round of charge. Ready. Continue the attack, the cavalry officer ordered, and the saber in his hand had a gap. This was his third encounter today. The charge horn sounded again, and the horses rushed towards the Serbian army with hot air spurting out of their nostrils. Those who were lucky enough to escape the first round of charge could only roar in despair as they watched the cavalry rolling in the second time. Since most of these cavalry were Germans, they could hardly understand what the Serbs said. Of course, it was impossible to capture prisoners, so the scene was extremely bloody. The Croatians behind the wall cheered when they saw the Austrian cavalry charging. Charge, kill these invaders, but after 2 rounds of bloody charges, these bloodthirsty and aggressive Croatians couldn't help but feel a little scared. If it was them standing there, facing such a cavalry unit, would they have a chance of winning? Obviously, no. While they were still shocked by the charge just now, a cavalryman holding the black and gold flag of Austria had already run to the entrance of the village. In very stiff Croatian, he said, "The prisoners have been captured. The wounded have been rescued. The horses need to eat grass, they are hungry." The village chief looked at the confused villagers, then turned to the messenger cavalry and said, "Sir, Please speak German. We don't understand your Serbian. The cavalry looked depressed, as he spoke the best Croatian in the camp. There are still a few Serbs who are not dead. You can capture them as prisoners. If there are any wounded, you can go back to the Nordsavi fortress with us for treatment. Our horses need fodder, and we also want to eat something. We will pay in cash. The cavalry took off the purse on his belt and threw it to the village chief. The village chief opened it and saw that it was a bag of iron shields, silver coins. The villagers all looked at the village chief. In fact, except for the village chief, the German level of others here was also very poor and they were still confused. The latest novel is first published on 69shushu.com. The village chief poured the money from his purse onto the table. This is a reward from the cavalry master. Hurry up and cook. Add more oil. The Serbian army finally arrived at the city of Nordsavi. Valjevic rode on a tall horse and waved his whip in the direction of the Nordsavi fortress. Then a cavalryman ran towards the Nordsavi fortress with a white flag. Waving a white flag here means negotiation, not surrender. Our marshal said that as long as you surrender immediately, you can keep your flag and leave. Otherwise, our army will start to attack the city, and your life will not be guaranteed at that time. The messenger said so. Kalimi seemed absent-minded. How come your horse is so thin? What does your groom do? He has ruined the horse. Did you hear what I said? The messenger asked again. Yes, go out and tell him. Back off 500 meters, or else you will kill him. The messenger rushed back to the Serbian army. What did he say? It's impossible for me to back off. I will never back off even half a step. Push the cannons up now. Let the Austrians hear the sound of the cannons. The Serbian army pushed the cannons to the front of the battle formation to prepare for the siege. These cannons were the treasures of the Serbian army. The marching speed was so slow because of these cannons. Now it's time to play their role and blow open the gates of Nordsavi. Just as Valjevic was fantasizing about going down in history, on the tower of the opposite fortress, Kalimi asked someone to make a cup of coffee and asked Kafa to sit next to him to watch the battle. Ms. Kafa, come and admire our Austrian way of fighting. Fire. Hundreds of cannons in the Nordsavi fortress fired at the same time, including huge fortress cannons. Their range and firepower are totally incomparable to the Serbian army. The Serbian army's 6-pound field guns were completely powerless in the face of the Austrian 12-pound cannons and 18-pound fortress cannons. The huge iron balls rained down like raindrops, and Valjevic ran until he was 500 meters away before stopping. He discovered a huge problem. It turned out that the range of his artillery was 500 meters less than that of the opponent. Thanks to Book Friends Iadang 246 for the reward and Book Friends Iachwin Chunri for the monthly ticket. Chapter 85, Strategy, 3. Valjevic felt a headache because there was a generation gap between the weapons of both sides. The Serbian army still used the old British Brown Bess and French Charleville rifles, both of which were old flintlock antiques from the 18th century. The Austrian army used the M1814, an early percussion rifle, a new smoothbore rifle designed to win the Napoleonic Wars, but the war ended before it was mass-produced. The caliber and power of the artillery were also much different, and the quality of the artillery was even greater. What was even more terrifying was that the high ground where he was just now was deliberately raised with earth to cover up the traces of the previous test firing. In other words, he was calculated from the beginning. If it weren't for the low hit rate of artillery in this era, he would be dead. There were more than a dozen craters that were deliberately covered up like this. It seems that the other side is very clear about the range of their artillery and has set traps in advance. To be able to do this, the other side's generals are definitely not mediocre. Valjevic sighed, if you hadn't met me, you might have become a famous general in the future. What a pity. Valjevic's biggest regret was that he was not born in the Napoleon era, otherwise he would have had a good fight with him. He often said that if he was born in the Napoleon era, the French would not have been able to cross the Vistula River. For the attack on Nordsavi, he once wrote a letter to the Austrians asking them to send Archduke Karlin Radetzky, so that he could personally send these antiques from the Napoleon era to the garbage dump. But his own brother stopped his crazy behavior. Now this little-known Archduke in the Austrian military has become his opponent. This made him feel a little regretful, but for Greater Serbia, for the Jevic family, and for the beloved Tsar, he would still do his best to crush all enemies that stood in his way. Valjevic walked up to the scout who had just returned from the team and asked, "What are your losses?" "Report," The scouts saluted. The 2nd Valjevo Regiment and the 1st Kotselvo Regiment were almost wiped out, and only 37 officers and soldiers returned. The Gubica task force has not been contacted yet. Hearing the news that the infiltration troops were almost wiped out, Valjevich laughed out loud. Naive, so naive. A nerd from a military academy, a flower in a greenhouse from an aristocratic family, the Lukaski faction general on the side was very impatient. Valjevich, you are so happy to see the defeat of your friendly forces. What is your intention? Your shitty tactics have failed. Hand over your command. Valjevich glanced at the general who wanted to seize power. General Orva, are you a pig? What did you say? I'm not a pig. You bastard. Do you want a duel? Orva was nearly 60 years old, and at this time he was so angry that his hair and beard stood on end. You are not a pig. What are you talking about? I tell you, the advance team has 100 teams, each with 30 people. To stop the infiltration of the advance team, the other side must send at least twice as many troops. Based on my experience fighting against the Ottomans, for every person we lose, the other side has to pay double or even triple the price. Now the advance team is almost wiped out, and the other side's losses can be imagined. And due to the limitation of mobility, most of them can't get back to the Nordsavi fortress. General Orva was speechless after being refuted. He understood the seriousness of it. The 3,000 people in the advance team were almost wiped out, which means that the other side wanted to send out at least 6,000 troops. According to intelligence, the total strength of Nordsavi is only 12,000 people, and there are 2 gendarmerie battalions with almost no combat effectiveness. Then the remaining combat force of Nordsavi is only 5,000 people. The advance team burned down 74 villages and nearly 30,000 refugees poured into the Nordsavi fortress. There are also a large number of Serbian nationalists among them. Now, they just need to attack both inside and outside at the same time. The Austrians in the Nordsavi fortress are basically trapped in a jar. The Austrian artillery fire just now was indeed scary, but the actual losses of the Serbian army were not great. 20 cannons were blown up and another 300 people were killed. And now the Serbian army still has 100 cannons and nearly 40,000 people. Marshal Val, it seems that I am gone. In order to apologize, please allow me to fight and take the lead. Siege warfare has the greatest casualties and no benefits. Usually no one is willing to go, but it is different at this moment. Valjevic has made it clear that the Austrians in Nordsavi are already at the end of their strength. According to the special envoy, His Majesty the Tsar will reward according to merit. But there is always a difference in merit, so taking down the Nordsavi fortress is the first merit. Each general here represents different forces behind them, and they can get together because they have common interests and goals. But this does not mean that they are united. If you want to make these people bleed, you can't do it without bait. Valjevich knew this very well, and he found it funny to see these idiots rushing to die. The hammer is strong because it is strong. No matter how beautiful the Tsar's promises, you can't get it if you don't have the strength. Let these people and the Austrians bleed to death, and then you can clean up the mess. By then, you can complete the task assigned by the Tsar and consume the strength of these opponents, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. At this time, several generals were about to break their heads. Valjevich pretended to be angry and said, "Don't argue. The great struggle of the world depends on your ability. All of you should attack, no assists. Nordsavi is there, whoever takes it down will own it. For the Greater Serbia, for the Greater Serbia." Seeing that the Serbs retreated, the artillerymen hurriedly cleaned the barrels and carried the shells. Lieutenant Taro stood up and shook his sore neck. He had been lying on the shooting hole of the stone wall for 2 hours. At this moment, he suddenly found that Lieutenant Manchel next door was only wearing a pair of shorts, and his chest hair was covered with dust. "Lieutenant, why are you dressed like this? Is this the latest performance art in Vienna?" Lieutenant Taro joked. Damn it, damn it, damn it, no matter how embarrassing it is better than being captured as a prisoner. Don't these Serbs sleep? They set fires everywhere last night and attacked the city this morning. Lieutenant Manchel was obviously very angry. He slept very late yesterday, and heard the alarm bell early in the morning and had no time to put on clothes. In a hurry, he ran to the outer position in shorts and took a rifle. The latest novels are first published in 69 books. In fact, the soldiers around had already noticed this lieutenant who was dressed differently. But because of his lieutenant status, he didn't dare to mention it. Now that the Serbs have retreated, Lieutenant Taro mentioned it again, and naturally laughed. Don't laugh. Haven't you seen a man in shorts? Lieutenant Manchel protested. Captain Hans saw Lieutenant Manchel, who was only wearing a pair of shorts, and laughed. They have never seen a man wearing shorts on the battlefield. Do you think you are Scottish? You don't train seriously at ordinary times, so you can't wear pants at the critical moment. Lieutenant Manchel was a little helpless and could only run back to the barracks in a pair of shorts. Whistles continued wherever he passed. Karimi actually sent out 3 cavalry regiments. Franz's cavalry regiment had 1,200 people, and the ordinary cavalry regiment had only 500 people, and 4 elite chasseur battalions. Each chasseur battalion had 500 people, a total of 4,200 people to hunt down the infiltrated Serbian army. He sent these elite troops for another purpose, which was to receive the secret weapons that arrived tonight. Chapter 86, Strategy, 4. At noon, the soldiers in various positions in Nordsavie began to eat. Because of their artillery advantage, the enemy would suffer a round of cannon fodder before attacking. So everyone seemed very leisurely when eating, but this leisurely atmosphere was soon broken. Alarm bells rang everywhere in the fortress. The Serbs actually attacked from all directions at the same time. This shocked Karimi very much. He was eager to find out the enemy's main attack direction. After all, from the previous confrontation, the enemy's commander-in-chief was vicious, dirty, and mean. But Karimi couldn't figure out the enemy's main attack direction no matter how hard he tried. The defending troops had the advantage of terrain. The Austrian army was high above and had bunkers, but the Serbian army was not so lucky. They first had to endure the baptism of the powerful fortress heavy artillery, and then be exposed in the plain area without bunkers. Because the troops were scattered and could not organize an effective attack, occasionally a few warriors put ladders on the edge of the fortress. What awaited them was the terrible city defense grenade, a giant bomb about the same size as the mine during the anti-Japanese war. With a huge explosion, the people holding the ladder were often broken into several pieces like the ladder. The 6-pound field gun of the Serbian army could cause limited damage to the solid defense of the Nordsavie fortress. The 12-pound and 18-pound fortress guns of the Austrian army could cause a bloodline as long as they hit the crowd. Moreover, most of the soldiers of the Serbian army were peasants and serfs who were temporarily conscripted. They didn't want to fight at all, and coupled with a huge gap in firepower and position between the two sides, the morale of their army quickly collapsed. Those exasperated generals ordered the supervision team to enforce military law. This stabilized the morale of the army, but only half an hour after the battle began, thousands of Serbian soldiers had been left around the Nordsavie fortress. Damn it! How unlucky I am to encounter the main force of the Austrian army. I must have encountered the main force of the Austrian army. I must be able to attack in another direction. We must not let those speculators take the lead. The Serbian generals all thought so. The Austrian army on the defensive side suffered very little loss, and used this interval to rest, replenish ammunition, and repair the city walls. Captain Hans scratched his leather shoes, lit a match, and took 2 puffs of his self-rolled dry tobacco. What are these Serbs doing? They fight worse than the smugglers. These guys are really interesting. They run back as soon as they are shot, and then run a few steps and come back to be shot. I have begun to like them, Lieutenant Manchel joked. Lieutenant Manchel was right. The Serbian army with lax military discipline collapsed many times in the previous attack. As a result, they were always in the range of artillery fire. If they had made a desperate move and rammed to the city instead of repeatedly fighting in the area covered by artillery fire, then the casualties might not be so great, and the casualties of the Austrians would not be so small. The lax military discipline led to disconnection between the front and the back. The troops in front could not get reinforcements and had to retreat. When the troops in the back saw the fleeing soldiers in the front, they collapsed even more. Report, Captain Hans, only Big Head was shot in the head, and the rest only had scratches. Lieutenant Terrell reported the situation of the company. This nickname is really bad. A big head makes it easy to be targeted. Take me to see his remains, Captain Hans sighed. I'm afraid that won't work. Captain Terrell hesitated. Why? He was hit by a shell, and we can't find his head, Lieutenant Terrell replied. Well, remember to mail his remains and military pay to his family. Yes, Captain. Then they saw a strange scene. Several Serbian troops changed their angles and rushed towards the Nordsavie fortress again. Come again. Manchel had just taken off his boots. It stinks. Put it on quickly, or we will be killed by you before we are killed by the Serbs, Captain Hans said, covering his nose. The Serbian army made a comeback, and the most troublesome thing was the artillery, because they still had to turn the cannon. The artilleryman poked the barrel with a stick like a large match to compact the gunpowder. Then another person put the shell into the muzzle, inserted the fuse, and ignited it. Bang! An iron ball rushed out of the barrel and landed in a Serbian army. Amidst the screams, more than a dozen people were affected. The entire square immediately panicked, and the supervisors behind shot 2 people to calm down. The artillerymen pushed the cannon with difficulty to reset the cannon, and then used a wooden stick dipped in water to cool the cannon, preparing for the second launch. Under the cover of the infantry, the Serbian artillery approached the wall of Nordsahi again. However, the quality of the Serbian artillery was much lower. They hurriedly pushed the cannon to the front of the position and started firing randomly. As for whether it hit or not, it all depends on luck. Even if it hits, it will not reset. The next shot, no one knows where it hits. The casualties of the Serbian army are increasing, and the Austrian army is simply practicing target shooting. Of course, except for a few rifle shooters, most of the Austrian soldiers were fighting against the air. This time, the Serbian army's fighting was much stronger, because all the generals put their own troops on the wall in the hope of climbing the city wall and taking down Nordsavi. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. This time, the garrison of Nordsavi was in a bitter battle, and soldiers defending the city were constantly hit and fell from the city wall. However, the casualties of the Serbian army were not great. After all, the defenders still had the advantage of terrain. Every bomb could blow up a bloody flower among the Serbian army under the city. On Captain Hans's position, Serbian soldiers climbed up the city wall with ladders. The two sides fought fiercely. Lieutenant Taro had just knocked down a Serbian soldier with the butt of his gun, and a Serbian soldier on the other side pointed his gun at him. At the critical moment, Lieutenant Manchel slashed the man's face with a saber, and the Serbian soldier covered his face and rolled down the city wall. Captain Hans and several soldiers held wooden forks and pushed down the ladder together, and the Serbian soldiers on it were smashed into meat patties. Some soldiers, who were seriously injured, even chose to jump off the city wall directly holding the enemy. But the Serbs under the city wall did not intend to give up and continued to attack the city. Until the reserve troops sent by Karimi arrived, the Serbian army had to give up the siege. At this time, some shrewd Serbian generals had discovered that Serbia's strongest new army had not participated in the battle. Valjevic had been keeping his troops in place, drinking the best tea while hugging the captured woman and watching the bloody performances on the city wall. Valjevic took a sip of tea and stood up. Tell the brothers to save some strength tonight. We will have fun in the city tomorrow, thanks to book friends 20210806232711729 and Zyadang 246 for their rewards. Chapter 87, Strategy, 5. Out of consideration for preserving strength, the generals who had just participated in the attack did not continue to organize the attack. Because of the afternoon's battle, the siege troops had lost nearly 5,000 people. This is almost the same as the number of defenders in Nordsavi that they expected, and the Serbian compatriots in the Nordsavi fortress did not launch an uprising. The reason for such outrageous casualties is not because of how strong the Austrian army is. It is because the Serbian army's siege method is problematic. In the absence of heavy artillery, the firepower has been suppressed. If you want to rush to the city, you will have to suffer a round of artillery fire. After that, when you come to the city wall, although the hit rate of the smoothbore gun is not very good, the hit rate at 20 to 30 meters is still very high. In addition, a large number of city defense equipment was prepared before, and the oversized grenade would clear a crowd when it fell into the crowd. Of course, the people below are not without a way at this time. You can choose to throw the oversized grenade back. Not only can you escape, but you can also kill the defenders and destroy the city wall. It's just that throwing a large iron ball weighing more than 10 kilograms onto a 7 or 8 meter high city wall is impossible for ordinary people. Valjevic. We are fighting outside, and you are hugging a woman here? Why don't you move? Where is the insider you mentioned? We have been fighting for a day, and almost all the people are dead. Several generals led by Orva rushed into the headquarters angrily. At the end of the day, their direct troops suffered heavy losses, and some troops even lost more than 1/3 of their personnel. Not to mention the strong men they used as cannon fodder. These strong men captured from the countryside had already lost more than half. The Serbian military camp was full of wailing, and many people clamored to go home. but they were greeted with only slaps and whips. Some of the seriously injured were thrown directly into the broken house outside the camp and left to fend for themselves. I've said that it all depends on your ability. Orva gave you a chance, but you're useless. Valjevic kissed the woman hard on the face, then pushed her aside. Tomorrow, I'll show you how I fight. You old antiques should have been thrown into the garbage heap long ago. What did you say? You bastard, you're climbing up on our corpses. We're almost taking down the city. You're robbing. The credit belongs to us, yes. Ours. You despicable villain. Okay, you continue to attack the city tomorrow, I'll watch. I'll give you a chance, so you'd better seize it. I heard that Zagreb, a key border town of the Austrian Empire and the base of the Croatian army, has already taken action. When those traitors come, you're afraid you won't even have a chance to survive. For a while, these fooled generals didn't know what to do. If they really continued to attack the city, they would have to sacrifice all their troops, and then they would have no capital to compete with the Jevic family in the future. After all, in the Serbian Principality, assassination is a common thing. It is said that the untimely death of Filipović, the earliest leader of the Serbian uprising, was planned by Karađorđe. Karađorđe was assassinated by Milos, who also persecuted a large number of political enemies after taking office. The Nordsavi fortress has become a hot potato at this time, and they are not sure whether to take it or not. However, judging from today's battle, the Nordsavi fortress is not so easy to conquer. It is also good to let Valjevic try. As for the so-called reinforcements from Zagreb, they do not believe it. They have received news that the three countries have sent troops to attack Austria at the same time. At this time, the Croatians rose up in response to the call of the Tsar's Great Slavic Alliance. In their eyes, working for the Austrians at this time is equivalent to suicide. The Croatians will not be so stupid. Let us continue to die? Why? Give us your reserve troops. We need to replenish troops. The Austrians will surrender in a few days. These people are not going to continue the siege, but they have to disgust Valjevic, the bastard, before giving up the main attack position. Oh? Give you the reserve troops? Why? Just because you can't even climb up the city wall? You guys haven't even taken down one city wall. It's really embarrassing for His Majesty the Tsar. Not sending you to Siberia to dig potatoes is already very merciful. Don't even think about the reserve troops. If you don't believe it, you can ask who is willing to die with you. Valjevic looked down on these old guys, and according to his estimation, the Nordsavi fortress could be taken tomorrow. The infiltration troops sent by Valjevic accidentally caught a big fish. Now he has 4 trump cards in his hand, and he has taken the Nordsavi fortress, and no one can save this fortress. Tomorrow, another 10,000 fresh troops will rush to the front line. By then, the siege force of Nordsavi will be nearly 55,000. In his calculations, the Austrians have no chance of winning at all. His brother has no son, and it is very likely that he will inherit the throne of the Kingdom of Greater Serbia in the future. This made him a little too excited, so he had to ask the quartermaster to send the woman who had just taken the barracks to his room to spend this long night. The Austrian defenders in the Nordsavi fortress were not having a good time either, with a total of more than 1,000 casualties in the daytime battle. The main source of casualties was not only the battle on the city wall, but also the riot of the Serbs in the city. Because they were facing their own people, the gendarmes did not take force to suppress it at the first time. The extremists who had been lurking among the refugees took the opportunity to attack, killed the guards and opened the door of the arsenal. The weapons and equipment in the arsenal had been moved long ago, but the riot was not quickly quelled as imagined. Instead, it spread throughout the refugee camp and was finally suppressed after causing a large number of casualties. Karimi looked at the reported casualty figures and grabbed his remaining hair. 358 soldiers were killed and 790 were injured. 950 refugees died, many of whom were trampled to death by each other. 3 parts of the city wall were destroyed, and at the same time, the refugees' distrust of the army increased, so they had to increase the garrison. What went wrong? If it was Archduke Karl who came to defend Nordsavi, he probably would not allow refugees to enter the city. He would not send out elite troops to prevent the enemy from infiltrating. If the Serbs attacked the city like they did during the day, sending out a cavalry unit would be able to disintegrate the Serbian offensive and cause heavy casualties to the Serbs. The Nordsavi fortress, which was garrisoned by 12,000 people, was impossible for the Serbs, who had no firepower advantage, to capture. If it was Albrecht, he would definitely rush in. Before the Serbian army completed its assembly, he would send out troops to fight a decisive battle with the enemy and catch them off guard. The main force of the Serbian army was the private soldiers of peasants and warlords recruited from all over the country. Once they were scattered, it would be difficult to assemble again. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. And now he doesn't know how long he can hold on. He could only hope that the secret weapon Franz mentioned could help him capture Belgrade as soon as possible. Otherwise, he could only order the defenders to surrender. Then he would commit suicide with a bullet and be infamous forever. Karimi looked at the pistol in the drawer, then pushed the drawer back. It was already dawn, but for Valjevic, it didn't matter, because he already knew he had one. There was an urgent knock at the door, and he pushed away the woman next to him. He pretended to be calm and prepared to welcome his glorious victory. Don't be so anxious, we have to be graceful. Although he said so, Valjevic still couldn't stop rubbing his hands. Marshal, we lost. Belgrade fell, and the 17-member parliament has signed the surrender agreement. Chapter 88, Strategy, 6. Haha, don't be so serious when you tell jokes. No one will believe you no matter how good you pretend. Let's talk about their ugly appearance when they surrendered. Valjevic smiled and patted his adjutant's shoulder. His adjutant never joked, and he was scared by a joke. But it's no wonder. After all, this is a merit that will go down in history. Maybe military academy students will have to study this battle in class in the future. But this battle is just his debut. In the future, he will be remembered by history like Hannibal, Gustave, Frederick, and Napoleon. But the adjutant's expression was very strange, and he still stood there straight holding a document. Marshal, we lost. It was General Tasovic who came to support us who said that the Austrians captured Belgrade last night. At this point, the adjutant's eyes were full of tears. Marshal, we lost. You are talking nonsense. Valjevic grabbed the adjutant's collar. There are nearly 7,000 defenders inside and outside Belgrade. What can the Austrians use to fight? Even if it is 7,000 pigs, the Austrians can't kill them all in one night. Tasovic must be afraid that we will capture Nordsavi. He's from UGS. I won't be fooled, Valjevic shouted hysterically. The adjutant handed the document to Valjevic. Marshal, but this armistice agreement is real. It has the signature and seal of the parliament. Valjevic snatched the agreement and read it quickly, then tore it to pieces. This is a forgery. Tasovic and his master betrayed us. Send my order to arrest those who spread rumors. If there are any more people who confuse the army, they will be killed. The adjutant was very excited. Yes. Executed immediately. The adjutant finally breathed a sigh of relief. He thought Belgrade had really fallen and the 17-member parliament had really surrendered. It turned out to be just a conspiracy of factional struggle. These damn conspirators should be hanged. After the adjutant left, Valjevic sat dejectedly on the chair. He murmured, how is it possible? How is it possible? How did the Austrians do it? How many troops did they mobilize? 100,000? 200,000? No, there must be an insider. He poured himself a glass of water and drank it all. It doesn't matter if Belgrade is lost, and it doesn't matter if the 17-member parliament signs a surrender agreement. I still have 55,000 troops. As long as I can take down Nordsavi, I can hold on until the reinforcements of His Majesty the Tsar arrive. The Austrians will not be able to hold on. No one can withstand the wrath of Russia, France, and Prussia. The news must be blocked and those idiots must not know. Valjevic was talking to himself when he found that the woman was looking at him in horror. The woman saw Valjevic's fair size and wanted to get up and escape. But she had not run a few steps when she was caught up by Valjevic and pushed to the ground. The woman wanted to get up and continue to escape, but Valjevic grabbed her neck. The woman was unable to break free and could only squeeze out a few words with difficulty. I am also a Serb, but Valjevic did not let her go until the woman stopped struggling. But he was still worried, so he took out a saber and stabbed the woman more than a dozen times before stopping. While wiping the blood on the saber with a bed sheet, he murmured, your death is worth it, it's good for Serbia. The woman's beautiful eyes were wide open. She never saw her husband until she died. She was the smart young woman who exposed her father-in-law's hidden grain. What she didn't know was that her husband had been beaten to death in the riot yesterday. Belgrade. The battle last night came too suddenly and ended too quickly. As time passed, Yeladonia's heart became more and more uneasy. Why haven't the promised reinforcements come yet? There is more and more evidence to prove that she was lying. If this goes on, the 17-member parliament will find out sooner or later. By then, I'm afraid I will be unable to live or die. It was impossible to escape now, because the Council of 17 was full of spies. Even if he could still hold on, Count Hawkins was about to collapse. He had already marked the important facilities in Belgrade according to the plan. He had done everything he could do, and the only thing left was Franz's promise. But as a spy, she had long been mentally prepared to be abandoned, just like her relatives who got the family property when she was a child sent her to an orphanage to fend for herself. Maybe this result suits her very well. Thinking so, she poured herself a glass of wine. Suddenly, a huge explosion sounded, and she ran to the window to look in the direction of the city gate. She hurried out of the corridor and met Lukaski. Lukaski was wearing pajamas, but he didn't look panicked at all. "Good evening, Miss Piriska, the latest novel is first published on the 6th-9th book bar." Yeladonia nodded. "Good evening, Mr. Lukaski. What happened?" "Oh. Some restless bugs are playing tricks, but they are dead. I don't think the battle will last too long." Lukaski seemed very calm. "Why, the explosion just now was very loud." "Don't worry, we knew they would attack the city gate, so we made some changes to the gate tower. They can't get in. As long as they can't get in, the 4,000 defenders outside the city can encircle and annihilate them." Yeladonia smiled and seemed very natural. "What are those changes?" "We have placed explosives on both sides of the city gate. Once someone is smart enough to blow up the gate, the explosives will explode. However, it is not the city gate that is blown up, but the entire city tower. They will be blocked in front of the city gate, and when they hear the explosion, the 2 regiments stationed outside the city will come to support. By then, they will be trapped." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 Night Raid 1. However, contrary to expectations, the sound of fighting continued to come. On the other side of the city, there was also a rumbling of artillery, and it was a louder sound than ever before. The garrison in the city was attracted to the vicinity of the North Gate, but the sound of artillery came from the southern port. The garrison commander of Belgrade immediately reacted that this was not their cannon. "This sound, this caliber is at least 12 pounds. No, this is the sound of 18-pound shipborne guns. When the Austrians transported their spoils in Egypt before, they fired salutes with this sound. This group of devils, they actually drove the Egyptian battleships into the Danube," the garrison commander cursed, while mobilizing people to rush to the direction of the port for support, and notified the troops outside the city to let them enter the city from other gates. The North Gate has been destroyed, and it is unknown how long it will take to clear it. In fact, the Egyptian sailing battleships cannot be called battleships at all, at most they can only be called gunboats. The Egyptian fleet is simply a joke in the eyes of the European powers, but it is simply invincible in the Danube. At this time, 360 cannons on 12 gunboats fired at the same time, turning the areas lit by torches into a sea of fire. The power of the 18-pound shipborne guns is not comparable to the 6-pound field guns of the Serbian army. The terrible explosions came one after another, and soon the important facilities in Belgrade were destroyed. The garrison, which rushed to the port, was suddenly attacked by cavalry. More than half of the people in this era had night blindness, but these elite Austrian troops who attacked Belgrade were not included. When the Belgrade defenders saw the galloping cavalry, it was too late to organize a formation. A round of cavalry charge had already caused a large number of casualties to the garrison, but this was not the end, but the beginning. The cavalry rushed through the crowd and left without a trace. When the garrison was reorganizing its troops, it was suddenly attacked. Austria's characteristic arms, the hunters. These armies composed of hunters are best at chasing and killing escaping prey. The situation of the Belgrade garrison was not much better than that of the animals. The hunters dispersed and surrounded the prey, leaving a gap. When the prey was about to escape, they chased and killed them all the way to enjoy the fun of hunting. When the prey was exhausted, they killed the prey in one fell swoop. It was the first time that the Belgrade garrison was treated as prey, but they were very skilled. They soon found their breakthrough, which was of course thanks to the clever hunters. They left their own bodies behind and fled madly along the arranged route. Of course, occasionally there were a few smart people who wanted to escape separately, but they were killed by the clever hunters. The rest of them could only continue to flee along the designed route until they ran to a dead end. The game was over. Usually the hunters would leave some prey alive and go back to claim the reward. However, these Croatian hunters still remembered the Serbs who destroyed their villages. How could they miss this opportunity for revenge now? The bloody sport only lasted for a short time. They had more important tasks, at least the superiors said. It seemed to be for peace and to end the war. But it didn't matter to them. As long as they could beat the Serbs, they would be happy. Damn, these stupid pigs. Where are they firing at? Why are our barracks and arsenals on fire? Lukaski cursed these damn gendarmes. They were such a bunch of rubbish that they couldn't handle it for so long, and I couldn't sleep well. Other members of the Council of 17 also rushed over. What's going on? What are the gendarmes doing? Are they pigs? Milos only has 800 people. Why did they fight for so long? Is Milos crazy? Why are they setting fires everywhere? Are you an idiot? Don't you see that it was caused by the explosion of the shells? Can't you hear the sound of the guns? Why are the important areas on fire? Yeladonia ignored the quarreling Council of 17. As she listened to the gunshots getting closer and closer, she became more and more excited. She knew that the reinforcements promised by Franz had arrived. The game of pretending to be an envoy was about to end. She returned to the room and opened a suitcase, which contained 4 pistols and a revolver. The hunters had already attacked to the side of the Garni Hotel, if someone hadn't accidentally attracted a dog. The barking of the dog attracted the guards. Now they have entered the interior of the Garni Hotel and controlled the 17-member parliament. But as far as the result is concerned, it is only a matter of time. Because the combat effectiveness of these so-called guards is really low, and they are all in bright places, which makes them targets for the hunters. Colonel Wiltse is the frontline commander of these hunters. To be honest, he doesn't quite agree with this crazy plan. More than 3,000 people want to take down a fortified city guarded by 7,000 people. This is simply too crazy. Especially the boat ride, which is the most difficult for him to accept. As a child who grew up in the mountains, he can't swim. He would rather be killed by the enemy than fall into the river and be eaten by fish. That is too shameful. But he was lucky and was not eaten by fish. Moreover, the steamboat provided by the Danube Shipping Company is spacious and comfortable. The ships of the Navy are really powerful. Just one round of salvos destroyed all the walls blocking the port. As for the Belgrade garrison, they turned and ran when they saw the cavalry. Don't they know that people can't run faster than horses? Then they ran away when they encountered the hunters. Don't they know that we can run 30 kilometers a day even in the mountains? Comparing endurance with us is simply courting death. Of course, they will die if they resist. Now they can't be called an army with these living targets in front of them. If they didn't have to escort an important person and ensure the safety of another important person in the hotel, he would have blown up the hotel long ago. The captain of the guard ran upstairs, and one of his arms had been broken. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Report, members of parliament, the guards can no longer hold on, they have already attacked the lobby on the first floor. Let's surrender, Captain, hold on for another quarter of an hour. Once the army enters the city, they will be able to wipe out the Milos rebels, but, no buts, you are a soldier, you know what to do. Yes, the captain of the guard was shot as soon as he reached the corner of the stairs, and blood splattered all over the walls. Soon the gunfire on the first floor stopped. At the corner, a wooden stick with a white tablecloth stretched out. Gentlemen, you are surrounded. For the sake of your own safety and those innocent people, please stop resisting. The 17 members of the parliament upstairs were very angry when they heard the standard Serbian. Croatian and Serbian are almost the same, and there was even a language called Croatian Serbian in the past. Chapter 90 Night Raid, 2. You traitors, don't even think about making us surrender. You are also Serbs. Don't you have any sense of shame? You actually work for that old bastard Milos. His Majesty the Tsar will not let you go. We are Croatians. Screw your Tsar. We only have one emperor. That is Emperor Ferdinand I of Austria. A curse came from downstairs. For these Croatians, it was an insult to call them Serbs. The 17-member parliament upstairs was also confused. How could it be the Austrian army? Did the Austrians hide in the Nordsee fortress and dare not come out after being beaten by our army? How could they run to Belgrade and find our hiding place? No matter who you are, the great Serbs will never surrender. If you don't surrender, we will rush up. By then, you will have no chance to surrender. If you don't surrender, come up if you have the guts. The 17-member parliament wanted to delay time. The longer the time was delayed, the better it would be for them. After all, reinforcements were coming soon. If you surrender now, I will treat you to hot pot in a few days. Colonel Wiltza downstairs was arguing with the Council of 17 upstairs, while his men had already approached from the side. For these hunters, 2 or 3 floors are really nothing. On the other hand, Yeladonia also opened the window and let down the ropes tied to the curtains. The hunters saw that this was the insider. The Council of 17 upstairs didn't know what hot pot was, but it should be a kind of food. This was obviously not important, and the best strategy was to continue arguing and wait for rescue. Why don't you surrender? If you surrender now, I will take you to visit brothels in a few days. A burst of obscene laughter came from upstairs and downstairs at the same time. The next moment, the hunter who had entered Yeladonia's room kicked open the door and pointed a gun at the members of the Council of 17. Gentlemen, you are arrested. Put down your weapons. Someone wanted to resist, but the hunter had already confirmed the safety of the important person. At this time, he would not hold back and killed the man with one shot. The member of the 17-member parliament, who was hit by the bullet, never believed that the other side would shoot until his death. He thought that since the other side had not launched a strong attack for so long, there must be some value in his people. As the 2 rebels were shot dead on the spot, the rest of them laid down their weapons. After all, they were not professional soldiers, and they did not want to die in such a useless place. The 17-member parliament was locked up in a hall, and at this time Yeladonia came in accompanied by Colonel Wiltza. The members of the 17-member parliament could not help but feel ashamed when they saw Yeladonia. Mr. Special Envoy, it's our fault that we did not do a good job of security. Are you okay? I'm fine, thanks to the strength of the motherland. I already know that the 2 councillors, Rakic and Eva, have been killed. I hope that no more tragedies will happen. You have to cooperate with our work, Yeladonia replied. The strength of the motherland? Oh, it must be that Russia is strong enough to save the envoy from punishment. Of course, but now we have become prisoners of the Austrians. The members of the 17-member parliament suddenly thought of something. Could it be that they want us to die for our country? But we haven't lived enough. We think there's still room for negotiation. Please don't do anything stupid, envoy. At this time, Yeladonia took out the armistice agreement that had been prepared long ago and put it on the table. This is an armistice agreement. For the sake of peace and for those innocent people, please stop this meaningless war, but the war has already begun. Now the 3 countries are attacking Austria. Austria will collapse sooner or later. The dream of Greater Serbia is right in front of us. There is no such thing as 3 countries dividing Austria. I am just an ordinary Russian woman. The newspapers you see are printed by us in advance. The revelations you have received recently are all true. As soon as these words came out, it was like a bolt from the blue. The members of the 17-member council could not believe their ears. This is impossible. Those documents, those newspapers, and the intelligence personnel we bought abroad, the members of the 17-member council were almost crazy. His Majesty the Tsar will definitely send troops. You are all dead. There are still 2 regiments of troops outside the city. You must want to force us to surrender. Otherwise, our army will enter the city and kill you all. Envoy, don't be threatened by them. They will beg us. Wiltza grabbed Lukaski and pressed him against the window. Look at the green flames over there, that's our signal. Your army has been defeated, and I don't know where it has fled to. We still have a garrison in the city. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. We have dealt with those garbage a long time ago. Look down. Following the direction pointed by Vilza, Lukaski saw dense foreign soldiers who had set up roadblocks and defenses at several interfaces around. How could this happen? Is everything she said true? Nonsense. We didn't attack her at the beginning just to ensure her safety, otherwise you bastards would have just left a few alive. Now you have to sign it or not. The terms of the peace agreement are very favorable. You just have to admit defeat and compensate us Austria for our losses. Velza laughed. At this time, the members of the 17-member parliament still couldn't believe the facts before their eyes. The dream of Greater Serbia was so close to them. But now it seems like it has never happened. Until Count Hawkins admitted in person, yes, this woman forged it all. She just wanted to cheat you of your money. Russia and Austria have an alliance. How could they declare war? You have been deceived, don't you know it? Me? Of course I am an accomplice. After I finish this job, I will go to the United States. Being a spy chief is not as good as being a capitalist. After hearing what Count Hawkins said, the faith of the members of the 17 Parliament collapsed completely. Taking the initiative to provoke the war, Valjevic used extreme tactics and was forced to surrender. I am afraid that these people will be nailed to the pillar of shame forever. But it has come to this time, and staying alive is the most important thing. After Lukaski signed, other members of the Parliament also signed the armistice agreement and confession. The seal symbolizing the power of the 17 Parliament was stamped, and the news was sent to the whole country. The next day, the Austrians prepared to leave by boat with the armistice agreement and the looted property. Before leaving, Colonel Velza and Milis made a handover. Now the city has been returned to Serbia. However, as soon as Milos took over the city, he ordered the city to be closed and purged of the Council of 17 and all those who opposed him. Chapter 91 Milos will arrive in his faithful Belgrade today. In the night battle, the two Serbian garrisons outside the city performed so poorly, not entirely because of the Austrian army's strength. It was because Milos had long since planted his cronies in the garrison, and seized power when the Austrians bombarded the night raid, causing command chaos. It was just that the commander of the Austrian side was not clear, he only knew that the opportunity was not to be missed. The mixed team of the Royal Dragoon Regiment and the local Hussars of Nordsavie directly launched a charge from behind. Cooperating with the gate-grabbing troops, the two Serbian garrisons were completely dispersed. The Austrian army invaded Belgrade from the southern port, disrupting the deployment of the Serbian army. Coupled with the sudden attack of Milos's cronies and the terrifying bombardment from 12 gunboats, the Serbian army outside the city fell into complete chaos. When the Serbian army finally regrouped, they encountered the Austrian cavalry who suddenly attacked. You must know that most of the Serbian army suffered from night blindness, and they could not figure out the direction when the cavalry attacked, let alone whether it was their own people or the enemy. The torches in their hands provided direction for the Austrian cavalry. Many of the Austrian cavalry were of noble origin, and even if they were not, their food was much better than that of ordinary soldiers. The proportion of night blindness was very small, and as long as the nutrition was normal, the night vision of horses was 6 times that of humans. As one side gained and the other lost, the Serbian army outside the city ran around like rabbits. Many of the dead were trampled to death by their own people, and not many were actually killed by sabers. However, it was dark and they were unfamiliar with the terrain, so the Austrian cavalry could not pursue and expand the results. Although the Austrian cavalry retreated, the desperate journey of the Belgrade garrison had just begun. The rumbling of artillery and the shouting and killing in the city were like a nightmare behind them. Soon the two garrison regiments collided head-on. Because it was too dark and the command was chaotic, they could not distinguish between the enemy and us. Everyone knows the law of the dark forest. Since you can't tell the enemy and us, just fire a shot and try it. Try it, and then the two sides really fought. I don't know how long the fight lasted, and both sides finally realized that they were friendly forces. But the beasts attracted by the smell of blood had already set their sights on them, and the mercenaries under Milis launched a new round of raids. When the day dawned, the 4,000 people in the two garrison regiments were less than 200. They had wanted to surrender long ago, but most of the mercenaries were veterans of the Austrian Empire who could not understand Serbian at all, and Milis did not want to leave any trouble. After recruiting the remnants of the army, Milis went to the Austrians to hand over the city as planned. The 17-man parliament fell, and the Obrenović family of the 17-man parliament naturally regained control of Serbia. The Austrian navy poured more than 20,000 shells into the city of Belgrade overnight. Although it was a targeted attack, the fire almost destroyed half of the city. The Austrian army only occupied the city center and the city gates, and any Serbian who resisted would be shot as an enemy. When Milis entered Belgrade to hand over to Colonel Velja, the whole city was in ruins. There were ruins and civilians collecting corpses everywhere, but surprisingly, these civilians did not regard Milos as a traitor. Instead, they regarded him as a hero. The reason was simple: the rule of the 17-member parliament was unpopular. They levied taxes without restraint and launched foreign wars crazily. And they chose a target that was impossible to defeat in the eyes of ordinary people. Although the Austrian Empire was corrupt, it was still a behemoth for ordinary people in Serbia. The flag of the Austrian Empire now flying on the conference building made ordinary people shudder. The Austrians' revenge came too quickly, and they could hardly believe it was true. But the defeat agreement signed by the 17-member parliament, read by the officials, made them believe it. The port was full of Austrian ships, many of which were steamships with black smoke that they had never seen before. There were also those sailing gunboats that they had only heard of, which made people feel daunted. Not to mention the Austrian cavalry riding tall horses and the fierce-looking Croatian hunters. At this time, Miloš suddenly entered the city with an army, which gave ordinary people and lower-level officials a life-saving straw. Look, it's Grand Duke Miloš and former Grand Duke Miloš. The Grand Duke is here with the army. It was the 17-member parliament that started the war, and we are all innocent. Grand Duke, please save us. Grand Duke, please, we are your loyal subjects. Long live Grand Duke Miloš. At some point, the residents of Belgrade spontaneously gathered behind Miloš's team. Looking at the crowd of people who were united and full of expectations behind him, Miloš couldn't help but think of the time more than 30 years ago. He led people to drive away the Ottomans and finally made Serbia actually independent. These people also welcomed him into the city in this way. But I don't know when it started, the people began to side with Karađorđe. That traitor clearly abandoned his motherland. How could he be a Grand Duke? The seeds of dissatisfaction and resentment sprouted in Miloš's heart until he heard that Karađorđe was going to remove him from his post. He decided to strike first, sent someone to assassinate Karađorđe and sent his head to the Sultan. He asked for it. I shed blood for independence and made contributions to the founding of the country. In the end, you want to usurp the fruits of the revolution and kill me. I don't accept it. My fate is in my own hands. I want to be crowned king. I am the Grand Duke of Serbia. Miloš thought to himself, but he became more and more uneasy. There were more Austrian soldiers in front of him than he had imagined. In his imagination, the Austrians should fight the defenders in the city to exhaustion. At least there should be heavy losses, and then he would naturally take over Belgrade and restore his rule. But in front of him were 3 almost complete cavalry regiments and 4 hunting battalions, not to mention that the so-called Blackwater security personnel around him were almost all Austrian veterans. What should he do if they refused to leave? He only knew the time of the Austrians' attack in advance, but didn't know the specific strength and deployment. He thought the Austrians would attack Belgrade from the hidden mountain road according to the route he provided. This hidden mountain road can almost avoid all detection. It just has a fatal flaw, that is, it is too rugged for cannons to pass. Attacking the city without cannons means huge casualties. Of course, this has nothing to do with him. He just wants to use the hands of the Austrians to eradicate the Parliament of 17. The latest novels are first published on the 6th book bar on September 9. But the performance of the Austrian army surprised him. The city known as the Key to the Balkans was conquered overnight, and there was almost no loss. The gunboats moored in the port and the steamships of the Danube Shipping Company, the property of the Teffi family, made him fall into contemplation. It seems necessary to strengthen the defense on the river, and never let the Austrians come again. But the performance of the Austrian army made him feel at ease soon. Colonel Wilczek couldn't wait to leave. After handing over the city and the prisoners, members of the Parliament of 17, they left with 2 members of the Parliament of 17 and several carts of spoils. The purpose of Colonel Wilczek taking Lukaski and Haljevic away was simple, that is, he needed them to provide evidence and take them to Vienna for trial. At the same time, it was also a reminder to Miloš to think carefully about the consequences of tearing up the agreement with the Austrian Empire. The reason for leaving in a hurry was that Noordzee was still besieged by the Serbian army. Although the 2 deputy commanders of the Royal Dragoon Regiment felt that the war was over and the Serbs would withdraw, they should also go back early to avoid missing the celebration banquet. But from the perspective of Wilczek, a Croatian, the Serbs are very likely to jump off the wall in desperation. Bringing representatives of the Parliament of 17 to the battlefield, they still don't believe that they have been defeated. If the other side still refuses to withdraw, then we will have to see the truth on the battlefield. Thanks to book friends Iodang 246 for the reward and request for votes, and for comments. Chapter 92, Make Up for the Loss. Yelidonia was guarding her baby in the cabin. During this period, she received many gifts in Serbia. Especially the old and dishonest Lukaski, who wanted to seduce her. But this didn't matter to her. She was trained as a spy since she was a child, and she had seen all kinds of people. She still remembered what Madame Sophie said to her when she met her in Schönbrunn Palace. As a woman, you must never lose your calmness and elegance, although the next second, Madame Sophie picked up a feather duster and chased Maximilian, who was drawing a beard on Maria, Franz's sister's face. But she still felt that she benefited a lot. But before going to Italy, she had to report the situation to the little devil who beat her so hard that she had no chance to fight back. When she thought of Franz, the little devil, she couldn't help but feel a chill. He actually hung a beautiful woman like her in the basement and said he wanted to use her for hot pot. He really didn't know how to be gentle with women. In Yeladonia's heart, it would be great if she could be the mistress of the future emperor of a country. But the other party didn't seem to be very interested in her. But it doesn't matter. I have completed the task he assigned me, and I will soon be named Baroness Monica. What she didn't know was that the ship was about to sail to the battlefield. Franz's mood in Vienna also went through many twists and turns. According to Franz and Karimi's initial calculations, the Serbian army would gather for a long time and hesitate, and a large group of people would definitely argue with each other for leadership. As long as they take Belgrade directly while the other side has not reacted, they can end this meaningless war. As for the 17-member parliament, they will surrender immediately when they get the news that the three families are divided into Austria. The Austrian Empire ended the war and signed an armistice agreement at lightning speed, preventing Russia from intervening and avoiding a direct conflict with Russia. It can not only avoid the Rothschild Bank step-by-step pressure, too much debt can only be exchanged for interest, but if there is a shortage of money, it has to borrow. Prime Minister Metternich also personally borrowed from the Rothschild Bank, but also make a profit from the gambling game and improve its international status along the way. Franz met Johann Strauss Jr. at the dance and wanted to ask him to compose a song for this victory. Franz fantasized about a great victory with almost no casualties, but the Serbian generals actually adopted extreme infiltration tactics to spread the war throughout Vojvodina. The Austrian imperial war minister directly ordered the Hungarian army to support Nordsavi, but the reply he received was that the troops would be assembled within a month. As for when they can arrive in Vojvodina, it depends on their mood. However, it will take nearly a month to transfer troops from Austria to Nordsavi, and distant water cannot quench thirst. Franz, who was still chatting about music with Johann Strauss Jr., the future great musician, immediately entered the working state. There is only one person in the whole of Austria who can save Nordsavi. That is General Jelatic of Slavonski Brod. The Croatian place name is a bit long. As one of the three generals who saved the Austrian Empire, Jelatic had no reason to watch Karimi of Nordsavi die. At the same time, Slavonski Brod is an important border town with sufficient troops. Then, under the persuasion of Franz, the Teffi family promised to lend all the steamships of the entire Danube shipping company to the army. In addition to the Austrian Empire's own dozen transport ships and the Navy's spoils of war, dozens of Egyptian transport ships, all were used to transport troops. However, only 8,000 soldiers could be transported, and this group of people was led by Archduke Karl himself. Archduke Karl's ability to take charge of the army again was of course inseparable from Franz's contribution. In fact, the royal family was opposed to Archduke Karl leading the troops again. Madame Sophie and Queen Anna had a big fight at the royal council. The proposal for Archduke Karl to lead the troops was approved, and the Austrian army was of course very happy to accept it. After all, Count Ural, the Minister of War, was a fan of Archduke Karl. This time, the elite troops he drew from Salzburg and the garrison troops in Vienna supported Nordsavi. Franz was desperate and tried all kinds of methods. In his opinion, the most capable fighters in the Austrian army were Archduke Karl and his son and Archduke Karl's two chiefs of staff. Albrecht was still young, and one of the two chiefs of staff was living in Moravia, and the other was far away in Lombardy. Only Archduke Karl happened to be in Vienna, and he had nothing to do. Madame Sophie herself was also opposed to Archduke Karl taking charge of the army again, but only because the Archduke's reputation was too high, and he also had the right to inherit the throne. But it was the first time that Madame Sophie saw Franz's anxious look. She felt that the matter must have been serious to a certain extent, so she agreed to intercede for Archduke Karl. When Jelatic received the pigeon letter, he and his family had just finished breakfast. The adjutant took out the expedited letter from Vienna, and when Jelatic saw that it was an expedited letter, he took the letter with an unhappy face and took a look. Immediately, his eyes widened, and then he kicked the adjutant to the ground. "You idiot, do you have a pig brain? Do you know what's written here? Come. Gather the troops immediately and set off together." Jelatic tore off the napkin and threw it on the ground, then kicked the door open and walked away. Franz found Prime Minister Metternich. "Teacher, I want to go to St. Petersburg with you." The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Thanks to the book friend Lonely Boy for the monthly ticket. Thank you for still asking for votes and comments, to prove that I am not a stand-alone player. Chapter 93 Sheep, Wolves and Shepherds. Archduke Karl regained control of the military power, and his old subordinates were very happy. In particular, Count Ural, the Minister of War, had already begun preparing a celebration banquet. He also took the opportunity to use his power and asked several important generals to return to Vienna to report on their work. The purpose was of course to let the old brothers get together. Albrecht actually wanted to be the commander this time because the title of Karl's son was still haunting him. However, since it was decided by the royal family and the Ministry of the Army, he had nothing to say. Although he hated his father's preaching, he still recognized his father's command ability. The grassroots soldiers were also excited when they heard that Archduke Karl was in charge personally. Especially since the opponent was a small Serbia, everyone was full of confidence and was ready to teach these invaders a lesson. But where did Serbia get so many troops? The citizens were even more confident in this war. There was no reason for the great Austrian Empire to lose to an Ottoman vassal state. When the army set out, they stood on both sides of the river to see off the soldiers going to Nordsavie. Flowers and salutes were like a festival. In the midst of the national jubilation, Archduke Karl was worried. To be honest, he didn't like to fight such an uncertain war. The 8,000 reinforcements he led, plus the more than 7,000 defenders in Nordsavie and the 3,000 task force that was about to return, totaled only 18,000 soldiers. Moreover, there was a serious shortage of field artillery, because there was no extra space to load artillery to transport soldiers and supplies. The number of Serbian troops was 55,000, and it was extremely unreasonable to use 18,000 people to fight against 55,000 people. The risk was too high, and the most reasonable way was to let the defenders of Nordsavie continue to consume the manpower of the Serbian army. Wait for the field artillery and more soldiers to arrive before starting the attack. It was just a gamble that Karimi could hold Nordsavie. The feeling of handing his fate over to others reminded Archduke Karl of some bad memories. But he, who pursued rationalism, would not change his decision because of personal likes and dislikes. So a strange scene appeared, and ships of soldiers were transported in. However, they did not immediately start to prepare for war to rescue Nordsavie, but instead dug trenches and built camps. The Serbian army had not stopped moving, and planned to attack before Archduke Karl had a firm foothold. However, the attacking Serbian army encountered more intense artillery fire than the Nordsavie fortress. The power of the 18-pound shipborne guns was no joke, and the formations of the two regiments that made a tentative attack were directly broken up. In addition, the coordinated attack of the front infantry and the cavalry on the flanks, the two Serbian regiments were almost crippled, and the losses on the Austrian side were almost negligible. After receiving the letter for help and the order from the royal family, Jelatic chose to send troops as soon as possible. He first led 5,000 troops to set off, and the rest of the troops chased on their own. He had 20,000 troops under his command, but they were scattered everywhere. Croatia is mountainous, and even if pigeons can be used to convey the information, the troops cannot be assembled in the first time. His plan was to send troops to the war zone together and then reunite. Doing so can save time to the greatest extent, but the risk is also relatively high. If the enemy discovered Jeladzic's intention in advance and launched an attack before the troops joined, it would be difficult for Jeladzik to organize an effective counterattack, and he might even collapse. The reason why Jeladzik marched at all costs was because the person who wrote to him was Franz, the crown prince of the Austrian Empire. Jeladzik hoped to gain the trust and favor of the crown prince, so as to enhance Croatia's future status in the empire. Almost all ethnic groups in the Austrian Empire were divided into loyalists and independents. It's just that the Croatian loyalists were stronger, and Jeladzik obviously belonged to the loyalists. But the Croatian loyalists were also divided into Austrians and Hungarians. The Austrians believed that the emperor was the ruler of the country, and the object of loyalty was naturally the emperor of the Habsburg family. The Hungarians believed that Croatia should be subordinate to the Kingdom of Hungary, and the object of loyalty should be the Hungarian parliament. The Austrians believed that Croatia should obtain equal rights with Hungarians through the royal family in the form of legislation. The Hungarians felt that the emperor was far away, and they should keep up with Hungary's pace and gain the recognition of the Hungarians as a top priority. Jeladzic sent troops alone to support Nordsavi, but only sent someone to inform the Zagreb parliament to let them decide whether to send troops or not. Because he knew that Zagreb was too far away, and the wrangling between factions would delay time. Once Nordsavi fell, Croatia would definitely lose the trust of the royal family. Without the checks and balances of the royal family, the Hungarians would be more unscrupulous. The Austrians only contributed money and manpower to popularize German, while other nationalities' languages and writings were prohibited in Hungary, except German, the official language of the Austrian Empire. Commercial contracts written in Croatian were not recognized in Hungary. Therefore, when Croatians and Hungarians do business, they must use Hungarian or German. Jeladzic's dream is to make Croatia a royal territory with the same status as Hungary. In order to win over local power groups like him, Hungary promised many benefits, even the position of governor. But he had seen what the Hungarians did, and saw them delete the Croatian heroes in history from the books and throw them into the waste paper pile. He saw them praise the Hungarian nobles with bad deeds as saints. A murderer who enjoys killing people is also known as a real playful person. Elizabeth Bathory, the Malza people wanted to portray her as a hero against the Habsburgs, but after digging deep into history, she was slapped in the face. Jeladic has read Kossuth's articles, and he has no interest in the Malza Empire. The Malza people do not consider themselves subjects of the Austrian Empire, or even Europeans. The latest novel is published on the 69th book bar. They are a group of wolves from the Central Asian steppes, and the people around them who are ruled by them are just a group of sheep. The Austrian Empire is also a sheep, so how can a wolf be ruled by a sheep? So Hungary is bound to rise. Malza experts spared no effort to remove the dross from the vast historical materials and delete the heroes of other ethnic groups in this land. Only the purest Malza people are left. Even as the commander of the Croatian army, Jeladzic was often forbidden to speak Croatian. This was because it was disrespectful to the Malzans, but how could they respect other ethnic groups? The Malzans often regarded themselves as victims of the rule of the Austrian Empire, but as a senior official, Jeladzic knew that the Malzans were the most opposed to national equality in the entire Austrian Empire. In Jeladzic's eyes, the Austrian Empire was not a sheep, but a shepherd. If the sheep believed that the wolf had escaped the protection of the shepherd, would the wolf still keep its promise? Chapter 94, Quirini's Decision. Rescuing Nordsavi seemed to be saving Austria, but in fact it was saving himself. Jeladic knew that the Austrian Empire had more than 400,000 troops at that time, the third largest standing army in Europe. The first was Russia, the second was France, and Prussia had strong mobilization capabilities rather than a large standing army, and Serbia could not defeat the Austrian Empire no matter what. And those who failed to rescue must be punished. At this time, the Hungarian side could put all the responsibility on himself. He could not refute at all, and could only grit his teeth and swallow his blood. Tell the brothers to hurry up, Nordsavi is in danger, Jeladic shouted while riding on a docile mule. General, Nordsavi is a fortress. Even if it has been in disrepair for a long time, the Serbs will not be able to take it down in 2 or 3 months. If they don't have the guts to surrender themselves, what does it have to do with us? An adjutant riding on a mule replied. Yes, General. Vojvodina is the territory of our Austrian Empire. We can't rob there if we fight there. General, you know that our military pay has been almost deducted by Hungary. If we don't work, our brothers will starve to death, another adjutant said while leading the donkey. The adjutant riding on the mule continued, doesn't the general's nephew live in Vojvodina? I have been to Vojvodina before. It is a great place. Endless black soil, plus the 3 major rivers of Danube, Sava and Tisa. I heard that people there have never been hungry. At this time, there were more than 500,000 Serbs and more than 200,000 Croats in Vojvodina, as well as more than 100,000 Malza people. General, you said that the Serbs invaded, so it's not too much for us to rob the Serbian villages, the adjutant leading the donkey said. Look at what's in your heads. We are soldiers, not bandits. Don't rob and rob all day long, but it's okay to temporarily requisition the Serbian supplies. But I'm going to say it in advance. If anyone dares to harm our fellow brothers, don't blame me for turning my face against you, Jeladic cursed with a smile. The 3 of them laughed obscenely together, but suddenly they seemed to be struck by lightning. The 3 of them realized something, looked at each other and immediately acted separately. Brothers, speed up the march, North Serbia is in danger. The Serbs have invaded, and our compatriots are suffering. The Serbs want to burn down our houses, kill our compatriots, and take away our women. Croatian soldiers, do you agree? No, then what should we do? Kill, kill, kill. The army of this era fights to support war, and looting is the norm. If they can think of it, the Serbs can naturally think of it. From this point of view, their imagination is terrible. Almost every soldier in Jeladzic's team led a donkey, and the whole team was like a thin gray line passing through the mountains. Most of the officers rode mules instead of horses. The reason was simple, because the road was rugged and difficult to travel. In addition, horses had poor endurance, and donkeys and mules were better at walking on mountainous terrain. Valjevic rearranged his military uniform, took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. He opened the curtain and walked out of the big tent. It was already a mess outside. The news of the surrender of the 17-man parliament spread rapidly in the barracks like a plague. The morale of the Serbian army was madly destroyed. The adjutant arrested the general who spread the rumors according to his order. There was also a large-scale conflict during the period, and at least 200 people were killed in the conflict. At the same time, there was news that the Austrian reinforcements landed and camped on the river bank, and the two regiments that made a tentative attack were defeated. Some people even said that the commander of the Austrian reinforcements was Archduke Karl, a famous general during the Napoleonic Wars. Although Valjevic had hoped to send this old thing to the garbage dump on the front battlefield to complete the transition of the times. But now there is nothing worse than this. If there is anything, it is that Austria is ready to deal with him with all its strength. What are the Russians, French, and Prussians doing? Why did the Austrians come to support the Nordsee fortress? It must be that the Austrians have given up the desire to save some dignity. Or do they want to concentrate their superior forces to quickly defeat the weakest enemy and open a gap? But there are only 3 or 4 regiments coming to reinforce, and their side still has an absolute advantage in terms of manpower. As long as he can take down Nordsee, it is only a matter of time before they are driven back. It is not without good news. His Serbian compatriots who were planted in the Nordsee fortress successfully blew up several cannons last night. And they successfully blew up an arsenal in the city of Nordsee, and part of the city wall collapsed with it. The fire burned all night, but the Serbs did not take the opportunity to launch a large-scale attack. It was mainly the problem of night blindness, and siege at night was more disadvantageous to the siege. At the same time, there were too many variables, so the Serbian army only sent a few small troops to pretend to attack the city and harass the Nordsee defenders. In the city of Nordsee, although Karimi had moved the location of the ammunition depot long ago, the riot during the day only burned down a few empty rooms and successfully caught a large number of spies lurking in the city of Nordsee. But that was just a smoke bomb released by Valjevic, and the real killer was at night. The Serbs who had long been lurking in the Austrian soldiers began to make trouble, assassinating officers, blowing up cannons, and even discovered and blew up an arsenal in the city of Nordsee. The fire spread to the refugee area, and the Serbian army launched an attack. As a result, there were not many people who could take care of the fire in the refugee area. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Report: last night our army lost 5 12-pound guns and 20 18-pound guns. The arsenal in the southwest corner was bombed, and the entire garrison was killed. The Cherub infantry regiment responsible for the area had 620 killed. The Kuril infantry regiment responsible for guarding the southern city wall had 65 killed and 120 injured, the adjutant reported yesterday's casualties. In just one day of direct fighting, more than 1,500 of the 8,000 defenders in the city had been killed, and nearly 500 were seriously injured. The casualties of civilians were too numerous to count. If a captain had not caught the infiltrated Serbian team while on patrol, and had known the tactics and movements of the Serbian army in advance, the casualties of civilians would have doubled. Thanks to Franz's plan, the surprise attack on Belgrade achieved the strategic goal. Otherwise, if this battle dragged on for a long time, Tsarist Russia would definitely intervene. Once Russia is involved, no matter what the result, it will damage relations with Russia. This would bankrupt the Austrian Empire's strategy of alliance with Russia. Once isolated, it would be devastating for the current Austrian Empire. Now we just need to wait for the news of Serbia's surrender, and the siege of Nordsee will naturally be resolved. But Karimi didn't know why he suddenly remembered Archduke Karl's evaluation of him at his graduation ceremony. Naive young man. Chapter 95, Dancing on the Edge of a Knife. Franz and Prime Minister Metternich have boarded the train to Galicia, from where they will go to St. Petersburg, Russia via Poland. At the train station, the royal family members all came to see Franz off on his first long journey. As Franz's mother, Mrs. Sophie, was naturally worried, and stuffed 20 kilograms of dried meat into Franz's luggage. If Franz had not insisted on exercising his strength far beyond his peers, he really couldn't carry it. Accompanying Franz on the trip was Franz's guard captain, Major Poldo. Their family had served in the Royal Guard for more than a dozen generations. There was no doubt about their loyalty, but they were a little neurotic. Franz, remember to bring back a few bottles of vodka. You must come back drunk so that you won't lose anything, Franz's chief father shouted loudly. As long as it was related to alcohol, his wisdom was endless. He actually thought of coming back drunk, such a magical operation. But this shouting reminded Franz's little sister Maria, Brother, I want chocolate. I want Russian dolls. I want more. I want an amber necklace. I want big black bread. Maria stuttered and said more than a dozen kinds of things that could be brought and those that could not be brought. Ludwig also wanted to join in the fun, but was stopped by Franz's disapproving eyes. Colonel Bordeaux thoughtfully wrote down the list of items Maria asked for. It's just that the handwriting was too flamboyant, at least Franz couldn't understand it. Franz took the initiative to ask Prime Minister Metternich to go to St. Petersburg with the purpose of preventing further rupture of Russian-Austrian relations. Franz could no longer bear the risk. He didn't want to make the Austrian Empire unable to survive even the stormy year because of his whim. Also rushing to St. Petersburg was Heinrich Wissel, the extremely incompetent Prussian foreign minister. Like the Prussian prime minister at the time, he was extremely afraid of Austria's power. He hoped to win over Russia and ensure that Austria would not take action against the German Federation. After the Vienna Conference, Austria was the chairman of the German Confederation. In theory, Austria could mobilize the power of the German Confederation. The representative of France was the conservative François Guizot. His purpose was simple, that is, to destroy the Three Emperors alliance and find allies for France, so as to change the current state of French isolation, and it would be best if he could plant a nail for the British. The previous Egyptian incident made France hate Britain to the bone, and it almost declared war on Britain. The British side sent Viscount Palmerston, a typical British diplomat. He was afraid that the world would not be in chaos, the continent was balanced, and glorious independence could perfectly interpret his style of doing things. His famous saying "there are no eternal friends, only eternal interests," is the fundamental principle of British foreign policy. On the Ottoman side, Grand Vizier Zak can be regarded as the most unlucky Grand Vizier in history. He signed countless humiliating treaties throughout his life, and this time the moth was because the vassal state attacked the great powers. He sincerely hoped that Austria, as a great power, would only take revenge on Serbia, as a vassal state, and never cut a knife on the Ottoman Empire. When Palmerston learned that Serbia was attacking Austria, he was so excited that he didn't sleep all night. Before that, he racked his brains to figure out how to block and weaken Russia, but today the solution came to him. Open the map. As long as Austria takes Belgrade, the Austrian Empire will have no obstacles whether it goes south or east. This will be unbearable for the Russians, and the weak Austrian Empire is unable to fight Russia alone. This gives Britain room to break up the Three Emperors alliance and win over Austria to fight against Russia together. That's right, now there is only one thing to do. Stuff Serbia into Austria's mouth, and the Russians will never be able to sleep or eat again. Thanks to book friend 20200526094618467 for the monthly ticket. Please forgive me for something today. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, Nordsovia Attack and Defense, 1. The cold drizzle enveloped the entire battlefield in a terrifying silence. The scorched earth and fallen trees were all covered in a thin curtain of rain. At some point, a wild dog appeared in the trench in front of the bastion. It might have been a domestic dog before, But with the destruction of the surrounding villages, it had become skinny and hungry without the ability to hunt, and its eyes glowed with ferocity. It saw the dead bodies lying on the ground in all directions, with guns scattered all over the ground. In fact, there were more dead bodies on the gentle slope opposite the bastion, but it didn't dare to go there without shelter. The blood and rain from the corpses mixed into streams, converging in the direction of the crater. A pure black crow held an eyeball in its mouth that it had picked from somewhere. Before it could swallow it, the wild dog pounced into the pile of corpses. The crow could only spread its wings and make dissatisfied ah sounds. The wild dog bit the corpses frantically, devouring its hungry flesh and blood. Then there was a horrible chewing sound, and saliva mixed with blood flowed from the corner of its mouth. The crow landed on a young man in Serbian military uniform, ready to use its sharp beak to tear off a piece of flesh from the man's exposed soft skin to satisfy its appetite. Ah! You damn beast! The painful and angry cry echoed in the silent battlefield. The crow was about to flap its wings to escape from the dangerous guy, but the man's hands had already grasped the crow tightly. He punched the crow hard, 1 punch, 2 punches, until he vented his anger. At this time, the crow was already a bloody mess. The wild dogs and nearby crows were scared away, and at the same time, the defenders on the bastion were also alarmed. The Austrian soldiers guarding the city hid under the oilcloth, using a cleaning rod to stir the gunpowder in the barrel to prepare for the final blow to the unfortunate idiot. Stojkovic was the name of this unfortunate guy. He didn't understand why a member of the Serbian new army would attack Austria. And why did they suffer such a tragic defeat despite having an absolute advantage in military strength? There was a commotion in the Serbian military camp in the morning. Shots were fired and many officers were executed. Some said that the government formed by the 17-member parliament had surrendered, and others said that there was no Great Holy War at all. The three-party division was just a hoax, but those who said these things were arrested and most of them have been executed now. We are the new Serbian army, the strongest fighting force in Serbia. We are completely different from those trash and peasants yesterday. Marshal Val promised us that we could take Nordsahi today. Every soldier has a share of the food, property, and women in the Nordsahi fortress, and no one can enjoy the spoils alone. Valjevic stood on the hillside, looking at the soldiers in front of him. Serbian warriors, the Tsar's troops have conquered Vienna. The Austrians in Nordsavi are just putting up a last stand, and they are just trying to stop a chariot under our powerful offensive. They will eventually be drowned in the ocean of history, and the great Serbian warriors will be remembered by history. Several soldiers pushed a German officer onto the stage, and the man looked at the Serbs around him with horror. Valjevic continued. This person is the special envoy sent by Austria to seek peace. You tell me about your emperor's request. Emperor Ferdinand said that he is willing to offer Vojvodina to the great Serbs in exchange for peace. The speaker was Ed Muller, who was driven out of the barracks by Karimi not long ago. After being driven out of the barracks, he did not dare to return to Vienna, so he went to a tavern to drink to drown his sorrows. By chance, he ran into the Serbian infiltration force, and the officer of the infiltration force arrested him when he saw that he was a senior official. In the Serbian barracks, he learned about the news of the three divisions of Austria, and he judged that the Austrian Empire must be finished. It would be more respectable to surrender at this time, and maybe you could have a good future. So Ed Muller surrendered, and he told Valjevic all the detailed information about Nordsavi. Valjevic admired this traitor very much, and the appearance of such a traitor further confirmed his idea that the Austrian Empire was corrupt. Ed Muller became one of Valjevic's trump cards, because Ed Muller's special identity and his words could shake the morale of the Austrian army. In this way, the defenders who lost their fighting spirit could not stop the powerful offensive of the Serbian army. Valjevic promised Ed Muller that if Ed Muller cooperated with Valjevic's performance, he would give him the opportunity to become a Serbian noble. If Ed Muller could persuade the defenders of Nordsavi to surrender, he would be appointed as a general. Although the hope was slim, it was still worth a try for the desperate gambler. After hearing Ed Muller's words, the morale of the Serbian army was greatly boosted. Those who were still hesitating before also shouted, "Long live Serbia, long live the Tsar." Ed Muller was pushed by the Serbian army and came to the Nordsavi gate. The defenders on the city saw a German officer holding a white flag and standing in the center of the road in front of the gate, and they all came to see what happened. This is the effect that Valjevic wanted. The more people saw it, the more it would shake the morale of the Austrian army. No matter how cruel the enemy's commander was or how strict the discipline was, the thoughts in people's minds could not be killed. Once rumors were generated, they would begin to spread everywhere, and the results were disastrous. Valjevich knew it, and the other party knew it too, but the other party could do nothing about it. Valjevich liked the feeling of making the enemy powerless. Listen, brothers in the city. I am Ed Muller, a major of the Salzburg Royal Dragoon Regiment, and I am the special envoy of Emperor Ferdinand I. Now the Austrian Empire has surrendered under the attack of Russia, France, and Prussia. You don't have to be buried with the Habsburg family anymore. You just have to hand over the head of Karimi Johann Esther von Habsburg. Ed Muller fully demonstrated his eloquence. He is a university student of noble origin. He quoted classics and used professional words. The great Serbian army will forgive us regardless of the past. Marshal Valjevich said that the reward for cutting off Karimi's head is 1 million rubles, and the reward for opening the city gate is 500,000 rubles. Don't make any more meaningless resistance. The Habsburg family has abandoned you. Think about your family. When Karimi rushed to the city wall, it was too late to stop it. He now had no evidence to prove that the other party was lying. He only had a note brought back by a task force pigeon that successfully captured Belgrade. The latest novel is first published on the 69th Book Forum. Before he could explain, a curse came from the top of the city wall. What is this German idiot talking about? Damn traitor. He is talking nonsense. He must be lobbying for the Serbs. Kill him. Whoever has a good gun will kill him. I will treat him to a drink tonight. In fact, the commanders of both sides overlooked a problem. The defenders of Nassau were mainly composed of Croatians and Hungarians, as well as a small number of Italians. They could only understand simple German, and they basically couldn't understand such a long speech. A burst of gunfire rang out on the city wall, and a bullet flew past Ed Muller's scalp. The 2 Serbian soldiers around him were killed. In fact, the target was only Ed Muller. But the hit rate of guns in this era is really touching. Even the hit rate of rifled guns is very touching. Ed Muller crawled back to the Serbian camp. Valjevich laughed at the behavior of the Nordsai defenders. It seems that the Austrians are really angry, but they are just furious. Even if the traitor is killed, the seeds of distrust have been deeply buried in the hearts of the defenders. I believe that as long as the army begins to attack the city, it will not be long before the defenders open the city gates and present the head of the Archduke, who is ignorant of the times. The army launched an attack from the east, west and south at the same time, but the battle was far more cruel than Serbia expected. Thanks to book friends, 20210806232711729, Ziadan 246 for the rewards, and Shii Liulian and Flammel for the monthly tickets. I have some things to deal with these 2 days, so please forgive me for the slow update. Chapter 97, Nords of the Attack and Defense, 2. Warriors of Serbia. We don't need prisoners, and we don't need mercy. The Austrians have occupied the sacred land of our greater Serbian Empire for hundreds of years. It's time to make them pay. The Austrians today are obviously as arrogant and self-righteous as they were in the past, but Serbia is no longer the Serbia of the past. We defeated the Ottomans, and now His Majesty the Tsar has sent troops to help us attack Austria. We want to take back our property, our land, and let our people return to the embrace of his motherland. The Austrians are ferocious snakes. They have evil intentions towards our country and are eager to try. Compromise and concession cannot protect our country, just like those Scottish nobles who were hanged by the long-legged king, King of Wales. We must be like William Wallace and use our swords and blood to fight for living space for the great Serbia. From the battles of the past few days, the Austrians are arrogant, weak, incompetent, and stupid. Look at the enemy's reinforcements. They are hiding on the river bank. They did not help their compatriots, but we Serbs will never let our Serb compatriots in the Nordsai fortress die. We don't seem to have the shortcomings of the Austrians, and we also have advantages and virtues that the Austrians don't have. Our ancestors once fought against the Ottomans at all costs, but where are the Austrians? That's right, they are hiding in Vienna. We have a quality that the Austrians don't have, that is courage. This is the key to our Serbs being able to stand on our own among the nations of the world. So, make your decision. Will you be a coward for life, or will you be the future founder of Greater Serbia? In addition, Valjevich promised the army that they could plunder freely for a month after conquering Nordsai, and that every soldier would be given land in Vojvodina. Valjevich attacked the city with 30,000 people, leaving 20,000 people as a reserve. The arrival of reinforcements led by Archduke Karl made Valjevic's deployment somewhat difficult. Judging from the brief exchange of fire, Archduke Karl's troops were definitely elite. But if he went all out, he would definitely be able to drive him back to Vienna. However, the losses from a head-on confrontation with such an elite force would definitely be considerable, making it even more difficult to capture Nordsavie. In addition, 3 days ago, two Croatian armies, Austria did not have division-level units at that time, moved their camps to support Nordsavie. He had to leave enough troops to prevent emergencies. Valjevic now only hoped that the Russian army could quickly deal with the Austrians and come south to help him. He believed that what Ed Muller said was true, otherwise how could a German nobleman drown his sorrows in alcohol in a tavern, and how could he surrender to him so easily? The core area of Austria must have suffered a devastating blow, and Archduke Karl's performance was more like a refugee than a reinforcement. Otherwise, Nordsavie was so close, why didn't he come to rescue? Valjevic thought, we must think about taking down Nordsavie and not bring shame to His Majesty the Tsar. Of course, he also had another consideration. After all, the game between the great powers is based on interests first. If Austria signed a humiliating treaty in exchange for Russia's withdrawal, sure enough, if you want to win, you still have to rely on yourself. As a member of the main attack force, Stojkovic was guaranteed that as long as he entered the city, he would be able to obtain the ownership of the 10 acres of land in Vojvodina and would not have to pay taxes to the country for 3 years. There were soldiers as excited as himself everywhere around him. Only an old sergeant frowned and sighed. The old sergeant is 50 years old this year, but he looks like an old man in his 70s. The old sergeant has been here since this army was not called an army. He has fought bandits, Ottoman officials, Ottoman troops, and local separatist warlords. The old sergeant has dozens of knife and gun wounds all over his body, and is called the immortal Joseph. But every family has its own problems. Joseph's parents were killed by Ottoman nobles in his early years. He rose up and followed Karageorge to rebel. After driving away the Ottomans, he married a wife and prepared to live a peaceful life. But things did not go as planned. Bandits broke into his house and raped his wife and killed his children. He joined Milo's army and began to fight bandits. Later, the Ottomans made a comeback, and he hid in the mountains like everyone else to continue fighting. During this period, he met his second wife, and Milos drove away the Ottomans again. He took his second wife to live in the city. Although poor, his wife was skilled, his children were sensible and well-behaved, and Grand Duke Milos often helped these old brothers, so life was still okay. There were also natural disasters, soaring prices, and people were living in poverty. Warlords took the opportunity to secede and establish themselves. In the warlord melee, his family was broken up again, his wife was hit by a stray bullet, and he left a 3-year-old child. He gave the child to others to raise, and never left the army again. In the army, there is no need to worry about food and clothing. Since he is old enough, even the battalion commander or even the regiment commander will treat him with respect. Most of his military pay was sent to his children to provide them with food, clothing and schooling. But this time he was not happy. What's wrong? Will the immortal Joseph be afraid? Stojkovic asked. No one will not die. Everyone will be afraid, the old sergeant replied. Someone next to him couldn't stand the loneliness. Old Joe, any wound on your body would have killed someone else long ago. During the attack yesterday, the commander of the 7th Company was hit by a shell and his head was shattered. You just broke some skin and bled a little. The 7th Company was the first attacking force, and only more than 20 people survived out of 120 people. The old sergeant did not answer. In yesterday's battle, a shell shattered the head of the old sergeant's companion, and the bone fragments cut a blood groove on his head. Now the old sergeant's head is still wrapped in gauze, but the soldiers are said to be a legend who can survive after being hit in the head by a shell. Old Joe, what do you think of our general's strategy? Attack from 3 directions, surround 3 and let the Austrians break out from the direction we planned. At that time, it will be easy to send cavalry troops to chase them to the north. Stojkovic has been under Marshal Valjevic for a long time, so he is naturally very confident in the marshal's tactics. To be honest, it's stupid. It's a mistake to go to war with the Austrians. The Austrians will not escape. The Nordsavie fortress is completely different from the warlord fortresses we fought before. Do you see the gentle slope in front? As long as we walk on it, we will be targets for the defenders, and many people will die, The old sergeant was obviously not impressed by Stojkovic's words. Why doesn't the gentle slope just block the Austrian shooting? And there are no obstacles, it's easy to pass. Stojkovic didn't understand. This gentle slope was ordinary in his eyes. In fact, the gentle slope was designed to make the attacking soldiers take more hits. Since the soldiers on the side of the city were shooting at the enemy from a high position, the distance between the enemy and the city wall would get closer and closer when attacking the city. The angle between the enemy and the defenders' sights will also change, including the angle of the cannons, which must be adjusted at any time. That is to say, as the enemy gets closer and closer to the city wall, the soldiers have to adjust their shooting posture. Even when the enemy is close enough, they have to lean out to shoot. This makes shooting difficult and increases the risk of being hit. It is becoming increasingly difficult for the cannon to shoot straight, and defensive grenades cannot be used indiscriminately. It is easy to blow up the foundation of their own city wall. These gentle slopes are used to make up for these problems. Simply put, a line is drawn with the shooting point of the defender's wall as the origin. Then make sure that the enemy moves as much as possible on this line. When the attackers step on these gentle slopes, their route of action will always be consistent with the angle of the defender's artillery. In this way, the soldiers' rifles and artillery can aim and shoot more easily. Because the enemy's movement is always in a straight line in the eyes of the defenders. So no matter how hard the soldiers on the gentle slopes run, they look like turtles in the eyes of the defenders. I've defended this kind of city before, and we were all dead. Watch out for those trenches. If there's no ladder, it's better to fall to the ground and pretend to be dead than to run back. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. Why? It's still this gentle slope. It will be almost impossible for you to climb back after you cross it. Although Stojkovic was touched by the old sergeant's words, he felt that the troops deployed in the attack today were twice as many as yesterday. And there were more than 10,000 of Serbia's strongest new troops, so there was no reason to lose. Walking in the front was a temporary army composed of serfs and other warlord troops who were temporarily recruited. With a hoarse slogan, the exhausted soldiers took heavy steps. Their eye sockets were sunken and their bones were as thin as straw that could be blown away by the wind. No matter how nice Valjevic said, they knew that they were abandoned people, just a group of cannon fodder. As the gunfire from the Nordsavi fortress sounded, pieces of straw fluttered in the wind. Just as the old sergeant said, the gentle slope ahead became the death zone for the Serbian army. I would like to thank my book friends Iodang 246 for the reward, and also thank the book friends who commented and voted. Then I also read the comments and suggestions of the book friends. I planned to revise the previous chapters recently, so the update speed will be slower. But please rest assured, book friends. Even if there are changes, the original text will not be completely overturned. It's just optimization and deletion, and the ambiguous parts will not be touched. At present, I just have an idea, and it's not clear how to implement it. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's just a reason to delay the update. Chapter 98, Nordsavi Attack and Defense, 3. Captain Hans's company was supplemented and the number of people increased to 150. At the same time, they also received 2 large-caliber artillery that used to belong to the main fort, as well as a batch of special ammunition. It is said that the price is very expensive, so we have to wait until the enemy approaches before firing. Lieutenant Manchel was injured in yesterday's battle. A ricochet bullet hit the wall and bounced back, just hitting the kettle hanging on his buttocks. It penetrated the kettle and embedded in his buttocks, so that he could only sleep on his stomach at night. Now he seems very irritable. Damn it, these bastards haven't attacked yet at this time. It will be time for lunch soon. Are they still counting on those damn traitors to cause us more trouble? In my opinion, we should kill all these traitors to avoid wasting our food. There are only a few traitors in total, and you want to kill them all. No wonder people say that you Hungarians are cruel. It's true, Lieutenant Taro was really cleaning the barrel of the gun seriously. He didn't know that he was too nervous yesterday and the muzzle of his gun was blocked. After the battle, he found that he had stuffed 5 bullets into the chamber. Captain Hans comforted Taro and said, "Everyone's first time is bad, it's nothing." Although it was a comforting word, it sounded very humorous to the soldiers. "Lieutenant, you are not much older than Captain Hans. How come it's your first time?" Yes, compared to how the second lieutenant's first time was, I care more about who the second lieutenant's first time was given to. The tense atmosphere before the war was instantly diluted a lot, but at this time, the sound of the Serbian army's attack was suddenly heard, and the alarm bell on the Nordsee main fort also rang. Lieutenant Manchel bit open the bullet bag and poured gunpowder. "It's finally here, I can finally avenge my butt. Damn it, I want to let you know how painful it is to not be able to sit. I'm going to beat your butts into pieces, Manchel. If you want to spank their butts, you can sleep for a while. There are more people this time than last time, and they won't escape for a while," Captain Hans laughed. Captain Hans got 2 rifles and also put 4 single-shot pistols on his waist like the Croatian scouts. Single-shot pistols, revolvers were not common in Europe at that time. Manchel kicked open a box, and inside it was a box full of giant grenades. There were 4 more boxes like this around Manchel. You should know that each company only had 1 box of these city defense grenades. Where did you get so many of these things? Don't steal them. If you get caught, you will be court-martialed, Captain Hans reminded. Stealing shit, I bought them for 500 guilders. The arsenal was attacked last night, and an acquaintance of mine risked his life to move them out. His company was on the north wall, and he probably didn't need them, so he sold them to me, Lieutenant Manchel replied proudly. You bastard, why don't you buy more? This is a good thing to save your life. Are you afraid that I don't have money? Captain Hans patted Manchel on the head. This is all their stock. The arsenal was attacked last night, and people were being arrested everywhere. When they arrived, there was nothing left in the arsenal. The vanguard of the Serbian army had entered the range of artillery fire, and the fortress artillery on the Nordsee main fort opened fire first. The huge iron ball whistled in, leaving a bloody line directly on the Serbian army. However, the Serbian army today did not collapse, and they continued to move forward as if they had not seen it. The soldiers who had just fallen to the ground and were not dead also immediately got up and returned to the marching queue. On the Nordsee main fort, the artillerymen who had completed a round of shooting quickly cleaned the barrel and cooled the barrel. A gunner took a shell from the wooden support beside and put it into the barrel, and another gunner used a giant match to compact the shell in gunpowder. There was a loud bang, and the shell flew out of the barrel and headed straight for the enemy. These skilled artillerymen can fire 2 shots per minute. The Serbian artillery came to the front again. Their task was to continue to attack the damaged western wall and try to expand a gap in the wall. But the hit rate of artillery in this era was really touching. Just like the range of Austrian artillery, it was much farther than the old field artillery used by the Serbian army. But it was simply a fantasy to hit the Serbian artillery. Similarly, it was very difficult for the Serbian artillery to hit the gap in the wall. In fact, even if the Serbian artillery hit, it would not be of much significance. Because the walls of this era were double or even triple layered, and the defenders had repaired them overnight last night and had almost repaired them. The real winner still depended on whether the Serbian army could climb the wall and maintain occupation. The Serbian army in front quickly climbed the gentle slope, and the defenders' rifles began to shoot. Since the Serbian army marching on the gentle slope had no place to hide, a group of Serbian soldiers fell down in the first round of shooting. Then came the second and third rounds. But the Serbians' efforts were not in vain. Finally, someone jumped down the gentle slope and came to the wall of Nordsee with a ladder. But what awaited them was a giant defensive grenade. This large iron ball filled with more than 10 kilograms exploded in an open area, which was devastating. The Serbian army that survived by chance had no time to think and attacked the city according to the original plan. However, the people on the ladder had to face the shooting from the parapets on both sides. Even if they were lucky enough to climb up the wall, they had to face the guards who were waiting for them. An unlucky Serbian just climbed up the wall and was greeted by Lieutenant Manchel's gun butt. Idiot, go down. Haha. Taro keeps throwing grenades, let them know how powerful you are. Lieutenant Taro cut the fuse short, lit the grenade, and threw the large iron ball with both hands. It hit the head of an unlucky Serbian soldier, and it was immediately bloody. The people around him fled for their lives before they had time to feel sad for him. After a loud bang, more than a dozen Serbian soldiers were killed. Seeing the tragic situation of the vanguard in front, the commander behind remained calm and ordered the remaining ragtag troops to continue the attack. A shell landed in front of the ragtag troops. Someone tried to escape but was executed on the spot by an officer with a single gun. Seeing this, the remaining ragtag troops had no choice but to bite the bullet and join the battle. Behind the second batch of enemy troops was the Serbian New Army, who followed behind the ragtag troops. Judging from the battle just now, the firepower of the Austrian army was just so-so. As long as they invested twice as many troops, they would definitely be able to break through the defense line, and they invested 4 times as much as before. The task of the first batch of ragtag troops was just to test the enemy's firepower and send ladders to the bottom of the city wall. The second batch of ragtag troops served as meat shields to clear the way for the Serbian new army behind. In fact, Valjevic was very depressed. In the past, he had the advantage of firepower in fighting. He bombarded the opponent with cannons so hard that he couldn't raise his head, so he had to go out of the city to fight. Then he completely crushed the already defeated enemy from the front, and this time he had to withstand the Austrian artillery fire. At the cost of huge casualties, he exchanged for a shortened attack distance. Although the cannon fodder were all serfs and soldiers of his hostile forces, they were all Serbs. Valjevic saw through the telescope that the defenders adjusted the firing angle of the cannon. That's right, the Austrian defenders were ready to stop the Serbian army's advance by direct fire. Valjevic had thought of this a long time ago, and he even felt that the Austrians changed a little late. The commander on the front line immediately ordered the team dispersed and advanced. The Serbian soldiers dispersed, reducing the damage caused by direct artillery fire. But there were still a large number of soldiers who were strung with big iron balls, and for a while, broken limbs and arms flew all over the sky. The bloody smell permeated the entire battlefield. Stojkovic walked in the queue, and he couldn't help feeling uneasy when he saw the massacre in front of him. But he was relieved immediately, because there were nearly 10,000 troops attacking from the front. According to the marshal, the total number of enemy defenders was no more than 5,000. There were probably only about 1,000 people assigned here, so my luck wouldn't be that bad. Report, Commander. The enemy's main direction is the west wall, and the Serbian new army is heading for our wall. Okay, tell them they can use shotgun shells. Many book friends like to say grape shot, but grape shot is strictly a naval weapon. The shotgun shells used in land warfare are much smaller and there are many more of them. Call the guards, I'm going to the top of the city to supervise the battle in person, Karimi replied. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. The messenger saluted and turned to leave. The adjutant knew that persuasion was useless, but he still reminded him, Commander, if the west wall is lost, we can still fight street battles. If anything happens to you, we can only surrender. It is an honor for a soldier to die on the battlefield, but I will not die. I don't have a son yet. I will get married after I finish this battle, Karimi vowed. Commander, it's not auspicious for you to say that, the adjutant complained. In fact, Karimi didn't understand one thing. He clearly got the information from the pigeon letter. Our army has captured Belgrade and the 17-member parliament has signed an armistice agreement. Then why is Serbia in front of us still so crazy to attack the Nordsavi fortress? Are these people crazy? Or do they think they still have a chance of winning against the Austrian Empire alone? He never thought that lies have such great power that can make people do a stupid thing regardless of everything and can't extricate themselves. The Austrian artillery finally changed to shotgun shells, and the Serbian soldiers were marching slowly on the gentle slope, singing in a line. The quality of the new Serbian army is still very high, and the discipline is better. It is because the Austrian artillery suddenly misfired that they all feel that their destiny is in their hands. Soon the shotgun was loaded and fired at the Serbian army on the gentle slope. The power of this shotgun is the greatest at 50 to 100 meters, and the steel balls are shot at the Serbian soldiers. Soldiers without cover fell down in groups under the barrage. The soldiers behind had no idea what happened in front. They only knew that the soldiers in front screamed and ran back. Being attacked by shotgun at close range is beyond the tolerance of ordinary people. But the officers will not show mercy to these deserters. After seeing the fate of the deserters, the Serbian army behind can only continue to move forward. Stojkovic looked at the front and tried to rush across the gentle slope quickly. Then he was shot in receive, and the body rolling beside him couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. But he was lucky, the shotgun did not hit him. Joseph, who was in his team, was also lucky. He used the bodies of his teammates to block the shotgun and escaped. They all fell into the trench below the gentle slope, which was filled with all kinds of broken limbs and strange-looking corpses. He had good marksmanship and killed a defender who was aiming with one shot. But the next moment, someone on the city threw a big black bomb in his direction. Lie down and hide under the corpse, Joseph shouted. Stojkovic grabbed the corpse to block in front of him, but before he could lie down, he was blown away by a huge wave. He hit the earth wall behind him and fainted, but the others around him were not so lucky. The explosion of the defensive grenade killed more than a dozen Serbian soldiers around him on the spot. There was even one who had just jumped down from the gentle slope and was directly hit back to the gentle slope by the air wave. At the same time, a piece of steel ball shot out and the man was directly shot into receive. The sudden increase in the firepower of the Austrian army turned the original plan of the Serbian army into suicide. The number of fleeing soldiers was also increasing, and Valjevic was not clear about the situation on the front line at this time. I still fantasize about taking the West Wall, and then using the West Wall as a jump to take over the entire Nordsavie. Chapter 99, Nordsavie Attack and Defense, 4. The Serbian new army is worthy of being the strongest force in Serbia. Even in the face of such firepower and such heavy casualties, it still did not collapse. It's just that the steel balls shot out by the explosion of the shotgun shells could not be resisted by willpower. But the Serbian new army also began to counterattack. At this distance, the rifles of both sides can shoot at each other. Moreover, the shooting efficiency of the Serbian new army is much higher than that of the previous miscellaneous troops. They can fire 2 or even 3 bullets per minute. The casualties of the Austrian defenders began to increase, and even several gunners on the artillery positions that were shot directly at close range were all shot out. Soon, nearby soldiers boarded the artillery positions and continued to fight. Austria has not fought for a long time, and there are not many grenades specially used for defense. Moreover, many officers ran to the front line of the battle, and the soldiers lit and threw the grenades without instructions. Without considering the subsequent operations at all, this made the Serbian army on the front line feel desperate. But the consequence of this kind of operation is insufficient endurance. As the number of defensive grenades decreased, the numerical advantage of the Serbian army began to play a role. Ladders were placed on the city wall, and a large number of Serbian soldiers began to climb the ladders. Gun smoke filled the air, covering the sky and the sun, and there was a cry of killing on the Nordsavie city wall. Captain Hans spat out a mouthful of blood foam, and slapped himself twice before he felt more sober. Just now, a siege grenade fell on the city wall. A soldier went to pick it up and prepared to throw it back down, but the person who threw it up was very experienced and the fuse was cut short. The soldier who was guarding the city just grabbed it and it exploded in his hand. The explosion directly resulted in the life of the soldier, and the blast also knocked Captain Hans, who was commanding, against the wall. His head was still buzzing until now. He pushed away the military doctor who was bandaging him and stood up with his gun. "Get out of here, do you want to wrap me up like a mummy? How long have I been unconscious? What's going on outside?" Captain Hans was not a rude person, but he didn't care about so much at this time. He kicked the door open, and the pungent smell of gunpowder and the cry of killing hit him in the face. Lieutenant Taro was clenching his fist at the door. "Captain, are you okay? Lieutenant Manchel is now in charge of the battlefield, asshole. How dare you leave your post without permission?" Captain Hans grabbed Lieutenant Taro's collar. "Aren't you afraid of military law? Who gave you the courage?" Lieutenant Manchel asked me to. Lieutenant Taro was about to answer. "Get back, immediately." "Immediately," Captain Hans roared angrily. Since the morning, the Serbs began to attack Nordsavie from the east, west and south. The worst was the south gate and the area defended by Captain Hans' company. Due to the use of too many defensive grenades and the enemy's artillery fire. 2 hours after the battle began, the area where Captain Hans was located had a large-scale collapse of the city wall. Fortunately, only the first layer of the city wall collapsed, but for the Serbian army that had been unable to attack for a long time, it was like a shot of stimulant. For a while, the enemy actually regarded the area where Hans' company was located as the key attack target and rushed in frantically. In such a close-range battle on the city wall, the advantages of firearms are almost gone. Countless ferocious-looking Montenegrin mercenaries, similar to the French Foreign Legion, climbed up the city wall with knives in their mouths. The soldiers defending the city rushed towards the enemy with bayonets in their mouths. Both sides were roaring and speaking in languages that neither of them could understand. The weapons collided with each other, and the sound of knives splitting flesh and blood, and the sound of bayonets piercing into the body kept coming. A Montenegrin mercenary who had been stabbed in the body roared, and his face became distorted because of pain. But he did not fall down, roaring, and chopped down a defender with a knife. But soon another defender stabbed him with a bayonet and pushed him down the city. Another Montenegrin mercenary who had already climbed onto the city wall raised his big knife angrily, wanting to avenge his dead companion. But the next second he was bayoneted to the ground by Captain Hans, who had just returned to the city wall. He wanted to stand up and resist, but then he was hit hard on the face by the butt of the gun, and fell in a pool of blood. I'm back again. All the weapons used by the Serbs are fake and inferior. See? That grenade is just a puff of smoke. I'm fine. Throw down all the remaining grenades and let them hear the explosion. So that they can know what Austrian manufacturing is, Captain Hans shouted. Lieutenant Manchel twisted his buttocks were injured before, and the continuous fighting made the injury worse, and smashed a lit grenade into the face of a Serbian soldier. Captain, Serbia's weapons are not completely useless. This explosion has made you humorous. Haha, it's no joke to hit the face with a dozen kilograms of iron ball. The Serbian soldier's face was immediately covered with blood and flesh. The big iron ball rolled down to the low-lying area in the trench, and then there was a loud bang. The air wave accompanied by the sand and gravel brought by the explosion knocked down a group of people. I don't know who shouted, "It's the reserve." General Karimi sent the reserve. Everyone hold on, they are finished, but at this time, the soldiers on the city wall were already blood-stained and didn't care about anything else. Some soldiers held a lit grenade and wanted to blow up the enemy's ladder. But they were shot by the enemy who climbed up the city wall, and the grenade rolled to the edge of the city wall. The explosion lifted the Serbian soldiers who had just climbed up the city wall into the air, and then fell to the ground and broke into meat patties. But the explosion also blew up the battlements of the city wall, and the Serbian army on the gentle slope could shoot more conveniently. Just when the Serbian army's attack was just getting started, the call for retreat suddenly sounded. An Austrian army suddenly appeared in the west and rushed directly to the Serbian siege force. Although this unit was small in number, as a sudden fresh force, it directly disrupted Valjevic's deployment. This unit was the vanguard of the Croatian army led by Jelatic himself. In addition to 5,000 soldiers, this unit also had thousands of donkeys. As a result, it was mistaken for cavalry by the Serbian officers on the front line. Being attacked by cavalry rushing out from the flank during the siege is no joke. And looking at the billowing smoke and dust, there are probably thousands of cavalry. Before the infantry formed a hollow square, they could not fight against such a large-scale cavalry. If they really formed a hollow square at this time, they would be blown to pieces by the shotgun on the city wall. The morale collapsed and the infantry fled everywhere. On the battlefield, there is nothing more attractive to cavalry than this. On the other hand, the commander of the Croatian army, Jelatic, saw that the Serbian army was actually retreating. He really wanted to chase, but the soldiers had been marching for 4 consecutive days and needed to rest. Moreover, the troops at hand were insufficient, and it was difficult to expand the results. There was also the possibility of counterattack by the enemy, so he chose to enter the city directly. Old Joe was an experienced veteran. When other soldiers were climbing the ladder in front, he chose to climb in the opposite direction. He was agile and didn't look like an old man at all. The defenders had just stabbed the people on the ladder to death with bayonets, and he was pierced through the throat from below. Old Joe grabbed the body of the defender, turned over and jumped onto the city wall. He shot and killed a soldier who was carrying a bomb, a giant grenade, and turned to avoid a bayonet stabbing at an angle. He stabbed the defender's stomach with his backhand, then twisted his wrist vigorously. He pushed the defender's body and rushed to another defender. The defender wanted to avoid the body and stabbed Old Joe. But he couldn't dodge in time and was shot at the body. Old Joe took the opportunity to chop the man to the ground with a knife. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. There was an explosion, and Old Joe rolled on the ground to avoid the aftermath. He chopped down 2 more defenders who were shocked by the explosion, and the Serbian soldiers who climbed onto the top of the city were encouraged. "Don't die, Old Joe. Don't die, Old Joe." More Serbian soldiers climbed onto the city wall, and the two sides had an extremely tragic hand-to-hand fight. Old Joe kicked down an Austrian officer who was twisting his butt and waving a saber and rushing up. Now in front of him, there was only an Austrian officer with a bandage on his head. He should be the highest commander in this area. The other side took out a single gun and aimed at him. Old Joe nimbly avoided the bullet fired by the single gun. Old Joe had already thrown away the rifle. Because in this kind of hand-to-hand combat, you will not be given 30 seconds to reload. Everything must return to the starting point. It is a contest of strength and will. Old Joe grasped the handle of the knife and accelerated towards the Austrian officer. The officer also threw away the single gun and pulled out a more symbolic saber. But suddenly the horn of retreat sounded. Old Joe was a little confused, but he stopped without hesitation and threw the knife directly. The machete spun and pierced into the shoulder of the Austrian officer. But at this time, Old Joe was no longer in the mood to appreciate his own results. He found a ladder and slid down with his legs crossed. But other Serbian soldiers who climbed the city wall were not so lucky. They encountered a dilemma. Continuing to fight without reinforcements is tantamount to seeking death. And retreating without anyone to cover is also seeking death. The best choice at this time is, of course, surrender. Once one person did this, the Serbian soldiers on the top of the city soon surrendered. The Serbian soldiers in the trenches below the city were not so lucky. They didn't even have the chance to surrender. The Austrian army aimed their guns at them as soon as they recaptured the city wall. Destructive shooting, countless steel balls burst out, and the soldiers fell like wheat. The Serbian soldiers in the trenches had to climb the gentle slope to escape back to their camp. But it was almost impossible to do it without a ladder, except for Old Joe. He found a long pole scattered on the ground and rushed directly to the gentle slope. With the support of the long pole, he successfully climbed the gentle slope and escaped. If the retreat horn was a little later, he would be sure to kill the commander on the city wall. This might turn the tide of the battle, but as a man who has fought all his life, the retreat horn sounded, and the battle was over. Even if he took the city wall with his own people, it would be useless. It was only a matter of time before the enemy counterattacked. He decisively chose to escape, but what he didn't know was that Karimi's preparations had arrived. Even if he kills Hans, the commander, nothing can be changed. Thanks to the book friend 20210806232711729 for the reward and the monthly ticket of Fixian Yazir. Chapter 100, Oris. St. Petersburg, Russia. Austria is still worried about the floods, and St. Petersburg has won its first snow this year. The white snow makes this city built on the jungle and swamp, carrying madness and dreams, look quiet and peaceful. It embodies the dream of Peter the Great and the dream of the great empire of Russia. Russia began its rise as a great power from here. The proud Baltic fleet is stationed here. A cannon shot brought France back to reality. The person responsible for welcoming Metternich and his party was Alexander, the eldest son of Nicholas I. He had traveled around Europe and was naturally received by dignitaries from various countries. He had a good impression of Austria, especially Prime Minister Metternich, who often gave him good advice. Metternich's private life was very short. Alexander and he became friends regardless of age. The two were both teachers and friends, and they shuttled through the streets and alleys of Vienna together. Vienna has the largest red light district in Europe except Paris. This gives young and energetic young people like Alexander a place to go. Metternich was also a famous playboy when he was young, and even when he was old, he was still involved in scandals. For example, Richard Metternich, who looked like Metternich's grandson, was actually his son, and not the youngest. Alexander and Metternich greeted each other warmly, almost ignoring the existence of Franz. Alexander's smile was a bit frivolous. Archduke Franz, I have also prepared a special gift for you, but at this time, Franz didn't care too much. He probably treated Franz as a child. Gifts and the like, most likely wooden horses, wooden guns, knives, medals or honorary titles. After all, it was very popular at this time to give honorary titles to dignitaries of other countries. After a complicated and lengthy reception ceremony, it was another boring ball. Franz had seen a lot of this kind of thing, and he would probably sit on the sofa until night. But after entering the main hall, a court lady took Franz to a ball specially held for him. Franz was very surprised that the ambassador of a country would hold two balls. But Prince Metternich held up his glass and said, Archduke Franz, have fun. Looking at the action of Metternich pinching the prince, there seemed to be nothing unusual. But Franz was still nervous. After all, this was different from his own experience. Franz's eyelids were twitching wildly, and he didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse. Under the guidance of the court lady, Franz came to the door of the venue. The court lady opened the door with a smile, and there were all kinds of Russian little lolly in the ballroom. Fat, thin, tall, short, cute, beautiful, a little immature, too mature, how to say, worthy of being Russian. No, this is not the point. The point is why everyone is watching Franz. Franz is not a thin-skinned person. It's just that under the curious and strong watching of the little lolly in the room, who would not blush? Franz came to negotiate, at least he thought so. But the Tsar didn't think so. He felt that Austria was very sincere in bringing the crown prince to the negotiations. If Franz could marry a Russian princess or the daughter of a duke, the Russian-Austrian alliance would be unbreakable. If Austria could be tied to the Russian chariot, Russia would no longer need to please the British. Russia and Austria would be invincible on the European continent. Not even the British. Both Russia and Austria are traditional land powers, and in the decades after the Napoleonic Wars, they have basically gotten rid of their dependence on British goods. Tsar Nicholas I was a sentimental man. Compared with the Serbian issue, an Austrian emperor who was kind to Russia was more important. He felt that the arrival of the Austrian crown prince was a signal of goodwill from the Austrian Empire. The Tsar felt that Franz was coming to marry, at least he thought so. For this reason, Tsar Nicholas I ordered that all princesses and young ladies of marriageable age in the country, the daughter of the duke is also called a young lady, which is a respectful title here, must march to St. Petersburg within a month. So there was the scene just now, when Franz saw a room full of little Lolita looking at him curiously. I will update this little bit temporarily, and I will continue to update it when I have time in the evening. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.